Chairman, Senate Defense Committee, to please come to take the rostrum and give his opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Good morning and Assalamu alaikum. In the name of the Almighty, the Lord of all mankind. First of all, heartiest congratulations to you on the 75 years of Pakistan emergence as an independent state, and the blessings of the Almighty and the efforts of the great leader Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, that today we are living as free citizens of a free country. I want to thank my good friend, Ambassador Nadeem Riaz, President of the Institute for Regional Studies, for taking this timely initiative. And I would also like to recognize the Honorable Ambassador of Italy to Pakistan, Ambassador Andreas Ferrarese. He's sitting on the front row, and he's a very distinguished Italian European diplomat with a global vision and a very good friend of Pakistan. And I'd also like to recognize, I think the titles are General Professor Dr. Raza. I think let's call you Professor Raza or Dr. Raza. And he is the president of the IPRI, Islamabad Policy Research Institute. And I've had the honor of being the founder of IPRI when I was Minister for Information, Culture and Tourism in 1999, soon after the nuclear tests and the Kargil War. So, you know, when we talk of think tanks, it's the battle of ideas. And in the battle of ideas, I think there's a very important role that has to be played. I will start by narrating two stories which I read. And these two stories are about Pakistan and India, which were published in the press. One is a story which came on, and both stories are on 15th of August. One story came in dawn, 15th of August, day before yesterday. It's about a lady called Karima Batul. She's a second generation Afghan Hazara lady from Quetta. And the story had it that she got a gold medal for the GIK Institute at Topi. She comes from a working class background, and now she has been admitted to Harvard University. So this shows Pakistan, despite warts and all, despite difficulties, remains a land of opportunity where there are opportunities for talent to emerge, talent to rise. And I think Karima Batul, in my view, symbolizes that. Her family were refugees in the Afghan war from the Hazara community, which is one of the most marginalized communities of this region. They came from a very poor background. Education, which is the key for social mobility. They gave that. She got a gold medal, went to the GIK Institute, which is one of the top institutes of technology. And then now she has been admitted to Harvard University. The same day, there was another story. And this story was in Reuters, the international news agency, where a lawsuit was filed in the Silicon Valley in the United States by low-caste Hindus. They said that we face discrimination in the Silicon Valley because we are Dalits, we are untouchables, former untouchables, and our upper caste Hindu bosses do not recognize the merit, do not give us that recognition. And 1,600 Google employees who belong to that. And this curse of casteism follows the Indian population beyond their borders, even to the United States of America. And the problem is, in the US law, there's no concept of discrimination on caste. There's discrimination on gender, on race, on nationality, on other things, but somehow, because caste is something specific to India. So what I'm saying is that this is, I thought, a very interesting analogy and comparison. When we talk of Pakistan, I would like to start by paying tribute to the great leader, Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, without whose efforts Pakistan would not have been possible. Quaid-e-Azam was probably the greatest Muslim statesman of the 20th century, the most successful barrister of undivided India, And the one politician of undivided India against whom not even a false allegation can be made about his financial probity, about his personal integrity, about his character, not a single. People can differ with his politics, but not about his character and his commitment to the Muslim cause. And the biggest tribute to him was paid by Professor Stanley Walpert, the American historian from the University of California, in his book, Jinnah of Pakistan. He writes, and I quote, "Few individuals alter the course of history. Fewer still modify the map of the world. And hardly anyone can be credited with creating a nation state." Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah did all three. And when we go fast forward to today's world, and we talk of how to be in politics, what to do. Quaid-e-Azam had no army. He had no atom bomb. He had no big bank balance. He was no feudal. He was no capitalist. He was a lawyer by training, a very principled politician, a liberal constitutionalist who believed in rule of law, a man who spoke up even for the terrorist of his time. The British called Bhagat Singh a terrorist. He spoke up for Bhagat Singh, for his human rights, when Gandhi had abandoned Bhagat Singh. So this was the kind of person who created Pakistan. And I was very fortunate that both my parents were active workers in the Pakistan movement. My mother had joined the Zanana Muslim League in the 40s, and my father, as a student leader in the Islamia College Lahore and the Muslim Students Federation, he took part in two important sessions of the Muslim League, 1937 in Lucknow and 1940 in Lahore. And I got some of those oral histories from my parents, that how the struggle started. When Quaid-e-Azam in Lucknow session in October 37 came back at the request of Allama Iqbal to India, he was very clear that two elements of society had to be mobilized. One, the youth and students, the other, women. His sister, Madre Millat, mother of the nation, Fatma Jinnah, was studying dentistry. He took her out, and she stood by his side because he wanted to convey a message that of equality between men and women, gender equality, and also that women should now come out and struggle for Pakistan. I think that was one of the important elements. And you can see the mobilization that took place. And my mother was in her teens, and she was then part of the Zanana Muslim League under Begum Salma Tasadduq Hussain. They were asking for donations from Lahore and other places. So the creation of Pakistan is quite a remarkable achievement. And Mountbatten, Nehru, everybody thought that it will not be possible to survive for this country. And you can see, I would say that two elements played a very key role in the formative phases in putting Pakistan on the world map. One, our foreign policy, and second, sports. Our sporting people, whether it's cricket, whether it's squash, whether it's field hockey, the talent of Pakistanis, the natural talent. And in foreign policy, I would say, we have produced three of the greatest foreign ministers who took positions, who put Pakistan on the map in the 50s. In my view, Sir Zafrullah Khan, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, and Agha Shahi were three of the greatest foreign ministers. And why do I say they were three of the greatest foreign ministers? Number one, they were very strong Pakistani nationalists. They were foreign ministers who had their own thought, own worldview. They would write their own speeches, and they would make their own speeches. Not that there was a text being written, but they could conceive the idea, speak on that idea, and write on that. So I think that, to my mind, and Sir Zafrullah Khan in the 50s, Then, of course, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto in the 60s and Agha Shahi Saab in the 70s and 80s. And Pakistan had its imprint. And I'll just give you some examples of that. In the 50s, less than 10 years after Pakistan's emergence, Pakistan was in the forefront. We had no oil, no money, but we had the idea of Pakistan, the inspiration of the Qaid. We were supporting the liberation movements of Morocco, Tunisia, and Algeria. I went to Tunisia to interview Yasser Arafat in 1990, and I saw Muhammad Ali Jinnah Road, Sir Zafrullah Khan Road, and I said, they said, you gave us support. Habib Bourguiba traveled on a Pakistan diplomatic passport. Farhat Abbas of Algeria traveled on a Pakistan diplomatic passport. They had offices in Karachi, then the capital. They had offices in a consulate, in our embassy mission to the UN in New York. And I would like to say, I know this may not be very popular with some people, but a pan-Islamist vision was part of that foreign policy and is an element of that foreign policy even today. The Qaid-e-Azam supported the Palestine cause before the creation of Pakistan. In 1940, there were two resolutions passed in Lahore, one about Palestine, the other about Pakistan. The Qaid-e-Azam was a great admirer of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. When Ataturk died in October 38, the Qaid declared a day of mourning for the Muslims of India because a great leader has died. He supported the Dutch cause, the freedom cause of Indonesia against the Dutch colonialists, and also in Africa. And he especially went to Cairo in 1946 and he met Mufti al-Husseini, the Mufti of Palestine. So you can see that that vision was there. And even when Liaquat Ali Khan Sahab went to America in 1950, a famous visit where he addressed the Congress also. I'm just talking of the vision of the founding fathers. The compendium of his speeches, which is probably in the library also here, is termed as Pakistan, the Heart of Asia. Today we have the Heart of Asia conferences here. That was 1950, based on what Allama Iqbal had written about the Heart of Asia. So that vision was taken forward. And I think in our foreign policy formulation, and later on the 60s, 70s, Pakistan was also supporting the Palestinian cause. We were the only non-Arab country. And Excellency made Ambassador Andreas Ferrarese that we are the only non-Arab country which has taken part in 2 Arab-Israeli wars. Our Air Force pilots, first in the Jordan Air Force in 1967, then the Syrian Air Force in 1973. They shot down Israeli planes. So this is what has been, our yes, when we reflect 75 years later, there are failings also. And I think 2 or 3 of those failings are, I think, very important, which we need, because when only we can move forward when we can learn from those failings. I think the first major failing has been a failure to give universal education to our people. Education is the basis of any country's rise, any country's march towards modernization. Education for boys and girls, for men and women. I think on that there has been a massive failure. Yes, we have 58% literacy when we had, in 47 it was 12%, but it's 58%, still not good enough. Bangladesh is almost 90, Sri Lanka over 90, India 78%. The second has been the failure at the political level that Pakistan's politics, unfortunately, have become an unending, unceasing political battle for power. And I think with an absence of rules of the game, I think is extremely important. That is another failure. And I hope that political leadership can also learn from those. And the third failure has been, especially this long-standing obsessions in foreign policy, especially the Afghan adventure. For the last 42 years, we have been involved in Afghanistan. And I think in hindsight, it's very clear that a lot of the policies were disastrous, which caused us a lot. And I, as editor of the Muslim in the 80s, I went to Kabul also. I was the first journalist to go to Kabul to interview the other side. I also felt that this would have negative consequences because we overreached, tried to have a government friendly to Pakistan, tried to pick favorites. And I think, like the other countries, we also failed. So I think a course correction is extremely important. And that, I think, is important. When we talk also of the foundation of Pakistan, I would say that the basis of the Muslim nationalism that the Quaid-e-Azam talked about, there were 3 or 4 important ingredients. One, of course, our great faith of peace, tolerance and harmony, Islam, which is our identity. Second, the Urdu language, which brought people together. And third, the democratic moorings of Pakistan. Because Pakistan is an outcome of the universal principle of the right of self-determination. All those who joined Pakistan joined voluntarily through the ballot box, either through a plebiscite, through a referendum, or through an election. And I think that principle is extremely important to understand when we talk of Pakistan. And of course, as I mentioned also in foreign policy, we have had, and this is with a lot of Indian Muslims also still, this pan-Islamism as an important element of their worldview as they see the world. Today, when we talk of Pakistan in the 21st century, I think that Pakistan has learned a lot from its own mistakes. In my view, we have a dichotomy. We have a soft state, but we have a strong society. The state, which is largely a colonial state, which we inherited from the British, is still muddling through incompetence, through failures, through lack of coordination. But don't forget, one of the greatest achievements that we have had in science and technology, and I recently wrote an article in Dawn on 14th August on that, how Pakistan built the bomb. 24 years of efforts, international opposition, through our own effort, through our own clarity of will, our vision, and our determination to pursue that objective. Through different regimes, civil and military. Iran tried it, Libya tried it, Iraq tried it. They had oil, they had money, they failed. And I think our national leadership, our scientists, they deserve that appreciation, that if we set our heart to it, we can do it. And I think that has been a very important factor also for national security. And today, if there are some areas on which there's a consensus, it's, I think, nuclear program, Kashmir, and CPEC also, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, where Pakistan is playing a role. The Quaid-e-Azam was asked in his first interview with a foreign journalist, which was published in Life magazine in January of 1948, with an American journalist, a lady. Her name was Margaret Bork White. The interview took place in October 47. And that time, Pakistan was an embryonic state, hardly any armed forces or bureaucracy, exodus of people, influx of people, refugees, money held up by India, war over Kashmir. And she asked, what is the future of Pakistan? What is Pakistan's role going to be? And Quaid-e-Azam replied, and this is published on 5th of January, 1948. In Google, you can see it, the cover story on Pakistan with Quaid's photograph. Pakistan is the pivot of the world placed on the frontier on which the future geopolitics of the world revolves. And the last 50 years, you can see whether it's 1972, 50 years ago, the most important development after World War II was the American opening to China. Pakistan was the bridge. The last big battle of the 20th century, which ended the Cold War, led to the collapse of communism in Eastern Europe, demise of the Soviet Union, and the demolition of the Berlin Wall, the Afghan War. Pakistan was in the front, rightly or wrongly. And also 21st century, the war on terror. And we are the only country which has been successful in an inland war on terrorism in the 21st century through our own contribution of our armed forces and the people and the political forces on a national consensus. So this element of cohesion is very important. We have become more, I would say, because of us, the center of gravity has also shifted a bit to multiple power centers. It's no longer, in the past, there was the military establishment or the political establishment. Now we have multiple power centers. Provinces are strong also. There's a functioning parliament also. There are political parties. And the political parties, which are national parties, they have support in the different provinces. So they are a factor for unity. In the 50s and 60s, there was so division. So-and-so is a traitor, so-and-so is a patriot. That issue is no longer there. Today, we have Peshawar Airport, the Bacha Khan International Airport, which is unthinkable. The children of Abdul Samad Khan Achakzai were the governor or the leaders in Balochistan. So Pakistan has been more inclusive that way. Yes, we have learned from those mistakes, especially 71. Because that was a failure when we tried to resolve political issues through the military diktat, and we failed. And also, the Urdu language, the media revolution in television. So there is greater awareness. The nuclear bomb gave us security vis-a-vis India. That 71 is no longer going to be repeated because we have the capacity and the deterrence against a larger enemy, which is almost like a bully on the block. And the media revolution, the opening up, gave people the courage to question people in power, whether it's the military establishment or the political establishment. But yes, and the social media has further empowered people that way. So I think that, yes, there are issues in Balochistan still. And I wish the Balochistan report, which I had prepared in 2006, had that been implemented then, and even now, I think many of the problems could have been solved, but those mistakes were made. But on the whole, we are talking of Pakistan as a country with a very vibrant civil society, citizen activism. You already mentioned about Malala Yousafzai, her award. You mentioned about citizens who are active. So I think that Pakistan today, and I think the democratic system is a very key element in uniting the country, the society, the provinces of Pakistan. And when we see Pakistan's role, I would also like to mention India. Because for a long time, a lot of people would say, look at India. We have secularism, they have openness. But right now, the Hindutva ideology, which was there always, which started in 1926 with the formation of the RSS, which was inspired in turn by European fascism, especially Mussolini, by the way. Mussolini has admirers in India, by the way. and even there, they wear khaki knickers and a white shirt, and they have a salute also. So that thinking was the one which led the Qaid and Allama Iqbal to believe that now our future is in having an independent state of our own for the Muslims of the subcontinent. So today, when we see that, I would like you to refer you to an article by Arundhati Roy, the famous Indian writer, a very brave Indian lady, who wrote in the New York Times, and I quote, "In today's India, RSS is the state. In today's India, an architecture of fascism is being erected. And the policy is based on Muslim bashing at home and Pakistan bashing abroad." And I was reading a testimony by Dr. Gregory Stanton. He's the president of the Genocide Watch in the United States. He's an American. He gave this testimony to the US Congress on 12th of January, 2022. And he said, and I quote, "There is the making of a genocide of Muslims in Kashmir and Assam in India," quote unquote. So, given that context, I think we should be grateful to the Almighty. We should be grateful to our founding fathers, whether it's the Qaid-e-Azam, whether it's Madre-Millat Fatma Jinnah, whether it's the visionary poet Allama Iqbal, whether it's Qaid-e-Millat Liaquat Ali Khan or Sardar Abdul Rahab Nishtar Saab, people of unimpeachable integrity and honesty who led the struggle for Pakistan. They thank God that we have a state of our own. And I still remember the words of Yasser Arafat when I went to Tunis to interview him in 1990. He said, "You are very fortunate. You have a state, you have your own passport, you have your own country. We are still striving. And I'm not sure whether in my lifetime I can achieve that goal." And I would like to finally conclude by my own experience as a student in America. People say whether, even some people, I think probably misguided question about Pakistan, whether it was necessary or not necessary. I was studying in America, and I had, for the first time in my life, I had met some Indian friends, and we were together, and we decided to travel together. The Indian friend was from Assam. He had done his PhD, Dr. Manoranjan Bez Borwa, and Assamese are supposed to be liberal and open. And we said, let's go on a trip from Washington to New Orleans, and we'll stop on the way, we'll share our expenses. We were staying in a motel in Mississippi because I wanted to see the deep South, Mississippi, Tennessee, Georgia, all this. America is a large and a beautiful country. We were staying in a motel, and he asked, he was going to have a glass of water. I said, "Oh, no, I'll give it to you." I put the water in his glass. He said, "No, I can't have it. You touched the glass." I said, "No, I didn't drink it, but you asked for a water. I'll just," No. He said, "I'm a Brahmin. You are a Muslim. You touched my glass. I can't have the water." I said, "No, now I realize why we got Pakistan." The division, the animus, the prejudice, the bigotry, the divide is so deep. And my parents used to say when they used to go in railway stations, there was Muslim pani, Hindu pani. There was different water. Mashki aata tha. So I think we should be grateful. There's a lot of, sometimes there's ingratitude that we have a state. This state has to be built by us. No establishment, no general, no judge, no prime minister, no president, no politician will do it. It's the people, especially the youth. The Qaid-e-Azam mobilized the youth and students to build Pakistan. Without that, it is not possible. And the women, empowerment of women, role of women. And finally, I'd like to say there's this UNDP study that if women are empowered, it will lead to a 33% rise in our GDP. And any society which has prospered and progressed, whether it's China or Indonesia or Malaysia or Muslim or non-Muslim or Bangladesh, empowerment of women, equality of women has been the key. So Pakistan, in my view, is a land of opportunity. I came back to Pakistan, I didn't have a job. I worked. Yes, you have to go through a bit of a ragda, but you get the opportunities even without Safarish. My wife, she was studying in Columbia. She came back. My son studied in the US. He came back. My daughter-in-law studied in LSC. She came back. And by the grace of Almighty, we're living very contented, satisfactory lives as free citizens of a free Pakistan. Pakistan Zindabad, Qaid-e-Azam Zindabad. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your pertinent and we would like to now move on to the first session of our seminar today. The first session will be...
I recognize Qibla Yasab. I've known him for a very long time. He was on the faculty in Punjab, Peshawar University. I used to be at the Punjab University before I got thrown out, but we are back here. And Qibla Saab is now chairman of the Council of Islamic Ideology, and a person who has a vision, the public intellectual, and a lot of Good luck to you, sir. I have to beg leave because I have to go to the session of Parliament at 11 o'clock.
Thank you so much.
This meeting today. So I will miss out, but please send me the transcript. Thank you, sir.
So we'd like to move on to session one, which is historical perspective. Dr. Qibla Ayaz, Chairman, Council of Islamic Ideology, will be the session chair. I would like to request all the speakers to please take the stage. We have Ambassador Dr. Major General Raza Mohammed, who is a president at IPRI. We have Professor Dr. Shaheen Akhtar, who is from the IR Department of the National Defense University. And virtually, we have Dr. Yaqub Khan Bangash joining us, who is a historian at USEFP South Asia Institute, Harvard University. I would like to hand the floor over to Dr. Qibla Ayaz, who will now take the session forward. I would also like to request Dr. Qibla Ayaz to please give his opening remarks as the session chair. Sir, would you like to come here? Would you give them from your seat? Okay.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Great pleasure indeed to be part of this very informative academic event in which this session one has been reserved for historical perspective. And we are very fortunate that scholars like Professor Fateh Malik, who will probably be joining us, is not joining us. Dr. Shaheen Akhtar is with us. And then Dr. Yaqub Khan Bangash. He will be virtually joining us. And Ambassador Dr. Raza Mohammed. So a galaxy of scholars and also the delegates, I understand, very informed individuals from different fields and walks of life. So I am looking forward to a very illuminating, very informative, very enriching session. And probably now we will ask Dr. Shaheen. Major General, yeah, yes. We will request Ambassador Dr. Major General Raza Mohammed, and his topic is Pakistan at birth, issues and challenges. Ambassador, Excellency.
Your permission. All praises for the Allah Almighty. And salam be upon Rasul Akram Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And salam be upon Institute of Regional Studies, the President, and all those who sit here. It's a great honor and pleasure to stand here. And I begin my few words with gratitude to Allah the Almighty and our forefathers like Quaid-e-Azam, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, Liaquat Ali Khan, Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, and so many others who have bestowed upon us the honor of being in the independent country. Independence is a great blessing. And after Dr. Syed Mushahid Hussein's talk, very less is left to say actually. I had thought of saying certain things which he alluded to already, but most importantly, we should see towards Pakistan not just a piece of land, but a place which was carved on the earth, with the effort of, as said by Dr. Mushaid Hussain, Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and sacrifices of our forefathers. They struggled for this independent nation because they thought their political and economic rights were likely to be reserved by the majoritarian Hindu rulers, which were likely to be brought up by the Britishers. If you remember, Muslims started coming into the subcontinent in 7th century. And it was in 12th century that Mughal Empire was established, and the subcontinent was ruled from 12th century till 17th century, wholly solely by the Muslims. But the Muslims rulers, which were the Mughal rulers, they were kind of benign rulers. There were no discrimination. And people went to the extent of inventing new deen Akbari or so, and so many other thoughts to accommodate the non-Muslims into the bigger polity. But it was 1857's War of Independence. Thereafter, the Muslims came under the harsh measures by the British colonizers. When the colonization came to the subcontinent, you must have read, the subcontinent's share in the GDP was about 30% in the world. Somewhere it is written 34 to 37%, somewhere it is 35%. But it was much more than the British Empire of that time. Actually, the British Empire became the British Empire after occupation of the subcontinent. The colonization, the horrors of colonizations is not the subject to today, but just a small example. We used to hear, I'm not very young, I'm just 10 years younger than the Pakistan. So we used to hear from our elders that a silk dupatta made in Bengal could be folded and put into matchstick dibia. Itna finely woven hota tha wo. And you know, the fingers of those weavers were cut by the colonizers so that they could not compete with the British industrialization, which was carried out by shifting the resources and everything from all over the world and industrialize themselves. Special taxes were imposed on the cotton products which were to go from here, which were to be exported or could be exported from subcontinent to Europe. This is a small example. When we come to the Muslims were rulers, they had command over Arabic language, the Persian language. The first blow was that Hindi was introduced as the official language and English as the language for the instructions, the medium of instructions and official language, and where the Sir Syed Ahmad Khan came and he actually asked the people to study English, get into the modern, learn the modern languages and learn the modern, acquire the modern knowledge. But now coming over to the basic topic, which was related to the formative year, but I would like to add 2-3 things. I've heard from my grandfather, my forefather, my father, when they were living together, because the generation of today questions the two-nation theory sometimes. Why two-nation theory? And there was a time when people used to say, India and Pakistan are one, we speak the same language, we wear the same clothes, we have a similar culture, we have similar kind of foods, we share the same cuisine, and so on and so forth. And this line, which is the border, international border, was called the line drawn with the blood to separate people of similar kind. But today, yes, one example which was quoted to support this argument was the separation of East Pakistan as Bangladesh from Pakistan. But did Bangladesh become part of India? No. It became a separate Islamic state. It still is. Second is the political and economic right, I have already said. The Hindus despised Muslims because they had been rulers here. And the other thing was the caste system. As the ambassador said this was narrated to be by my father, no one else, that they used to have Hindu friends and very close friends. But very seldom they would go to their houses. When they were taken to their houses, they were not allowed to enter into their kitchen. The kitchen was a place which was used for cooking and also eating. And a place demarcated for eating or dining space demarcated in the kitchen used to be called choka. So 4 corners. But this choka was not to be stepped on even by a Muslim. If by a mistake, a Muslim would step on that choka, it had to be washed, cleansed, purified again. And if it was a mud plastered choka, the mud plastering would have to be redone afresh. The women used to bring water from the village wells. My father told me, if we touched the woman, auntie, so to say, even her, not only the pot ko touch kiya to bahut badi baat. To her, they would throw away the water and go back to the well because they would say the water has been polluted. The economy had been dominated by the Hindus now, just close to the partition. The Muslims, what they would do, they were either agriculturists or they were artisans. And because of the caste system, they were ridiculed. Cobbler, carpenter, the mason, the oil maker, and so on and so forth. They would be ridiculed and demeaned as people who belong to a lower caste. So to discourage them that they should not earn money, they were the only people who could earn money. Otherwise, it was the crops, and you would earn money after 6 months. And for those 6 months, you were under loan or debt to the Hindu shopkeepers who would give you everything, eatables and other things on interest, and that could be converted into compound interest ultimately. And once some child used to be admitted in the school, they would go to the shopkeeper and ask some money as a loan. He would lure them in. Why are you taking this loan? This loan is going to become a burden for you. And why are you sending this child to school? Send him to me. I'll employ him here and I'll give him 1 anna in 1 month. So discouraging them from education. So these were the kind of environment in which in which the Muslims stood under the leadership of the Qaid and other people. And when we come to the problems of the formative year, I think the biggest problem was the Radcliffe Award. You must have read it in your histories classes. Few days, 1 or 2 days before the partition, the Radcliffe Award was changed. The principle of partition was that majority Muslim provinces going to Pakistan, majority Hindu provinces going to India, 565 princely states had to make their own decision. Now what happened was that a day before the partition was to be enacted, the Gurdaspur, especially Gurdaspur, Jalandhar and Firozpur, these are the contiguous districts with Lahore and Punjab's border, Pakistani Punjab. And these were the access points or the routes to Kashmir. The only route to Kashmir was over the Madhupur headworks, the bridge over Ravi. This was given a night before to India. Now what happened? This gave access to India to send their forces into Kashmir, force the Maharaja to sign the accession agreement against the standstill agreement which they had signed already with Pakistan, and occupy Kashmir. And that bone of contentions continues to today, dominates our thought, dominates our psyche, dominates our foreign policy. And more than everything, it takes major part of our budget and effort, which is direly needed for the development of social side. This resulted into mass exodus, and in 1 month, 5 lakh people, 5 lakh Muslims who were migrating to Pakistan were killed in 1 month. The trains coming into Pakistan, whole of the train would reach here with dead bodies. Sorry to say, stinking. This was a major problem, which was intentionally left by the colonizers and which lingers on today. The other problems which Pakistan faced during the formative years, for example, cash. The joint British India had a cash of a bank, State Bank of that time, State Bank of India of that time, 4,000 million. Out of that 4,000 million, Pakistan claimed 1,000 million, according to the proportion. But ultimately, the arbitral tribunal decided that Pakistan should get 750 million. And ultimately, we got only 200 million rupees, which was after lots of effort. But when it comes to the universities, you know it already, we hardly had 2 universities, very few colleges. When it comes to industry, almost nil industry was here. When it comes to the defense equipment, the decision was made that 64% of the equipment would go to India and 36% of the defense equipment would be given to Pakistan. But Pakistan got only 12% of that. That too, after lots of efforts, they rusted and the irreparable kind of equipment was given to Pakistan. India had 17 ordnance factories. They had 46 training institutions when it comes to military. Pakistan had none. So these were the problems of the formative year. But the most importantly, when it came to the struggle for formation of Pakistan or creation of Pakistan, there were 2 classes which were at the forefront. The first class was the salaried class. They are also called salariate by Hamza Alvi in his writings. So salaried class was basically a white collar class which was educated and employed. Their percentage was more than 60% before the colonizer came here. But in 1800, it had dropped down to 50%, and in Punjab, Muslims were about 61%, but the jobs were about 20 to 30% with them. Now they got up and they could actually sense that with the passage of time, with the change of policies and the British prejudices against the Muslims, the Hindu majority will take over all the good jobs. So they stood up. The second class which supported them was the feudal class, the feudals of that time, the Rajas, Maharajas, Nawabs, and others. Now what happened was when these forces joined hands together, they became the dominant power groups after creation of Pakistan. The connection between the political parties and the masses was amiss. Secondly, unfortunately, we lost Qaeda Muhammad Ali Jinnah in a year, and Liaquat Ali Khan was assassinated within 2 years of creation of Pakistan. When the major political leadership passed away or went away, the dominance came in the hands of bureaucracy. And then it was the bureaucracy which was calling the shots. In 10 years, from 1947 till 1958's martial law, 10 prime ministers were changed. A prime minister in less than 1 year. And the last nail in the coffin was that Iskandar Mirza, who was a bureaucrat, he became president of Pakistan, and he did 2 things. It started off with Chaudhry Muhammad Ali, that they made Ayub Khan, who was a young person, chief of army staff or commander-in-chief at that time, number 1. Number 2, a serving chief of army staff was made defense minister of Pakistan and sent to United States of America to negotiate on behalf of the state. So that was the beginning of a story of military takeovers or military's involvement, which continues till today in the politics of Pakistan. In 1958, Iskandar Mirza was the first martial law administrator. You may not be knowing it. The first martial law administrator of this country was a civil bureaucrat who became president and first martial law administrator. And sometimes people call him General Iskandar Mirza also. And after some time, when the problems continued, it became a lucrative place for Ayub Khan to take over. So this was again a problem of the formative years, that our political institutions could not mature comparing India. They had good luck of continuation of Nehru, continuation of their other leaders till late, and they could actually promulgate their constitution well in time. Our constitution 1956, which was promulgated, was actually a kind of copy or ditto of 1935 India Act. And it was only in 1973 that Zulfikar Ali Bhutto had the kind of blessing, kind of honor of getting the signature of all the political parties on a unified constitution, which continues till today. Last but not the least, there are so many other problems you have been studying here and there. There is no doubt Pakistan, creation of Pakistan, decision of our elders or leaders to create a separate homeland for Muslims of this area was the right decision. Till today, we live honorably and enjoy. Just ask those people who are actually not independent or who are not strong enough to survive at their own. Pakistan is a great country. Despite all these ups and downs, Pakistan has come a long way. When I look back to my childhood, the school I studied, the place I come from, and where I stand now. Similarly, you all can look back and ask your fathers, ask your grandfathers, mothers, grandmothers, where we were and where we are today. You go around, everywhere you see something coming up. Some new construction is going on. Some new road is being made. Some underpass is under construction. Some new building is coming up. Our children, our youth, they are sitting in their homes and they're working in the United States of America or Europe or UK or Australia online and earning a lot of money. A nephew of mine, he had some problems and he got sick. He had a degree in design. So he's at home. He cannot go out much. He's working on a laptop and he earns good money, and he has started investing in the cryptocurrency and earning money from there also. We are a capable, resilient nation. We have gone through many ups and downs. And every time it is like you dive into a swimming pool, you come out. This Pakistan is a great country. A day will come. We may not be here. You will be here, the young people. You will not have all these problems which are coming to you. But wo hota kya hai? Sorry, with apologies, I will narrate a poetry from Allama Iqbal and try to translate also. तुम दिए बाद मुखालिफ से न घबरा ए उकाब, ये तो चलती है तुझे ऊंचा उड़ाने के लिए. It's always like the tailwind gives you a push, but when the wind comes from the front, the aircraft is also lifted up. So Pakistan is rising, will rise. I have great hope. I have seen it rise in my conscious age of maybe 55, 60 years. And it will continue rising, inshallah. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Excellency Ambassador Dr. Major General Raza Muhammad Sahab. He in a very candid manner, educated us on the formative phase of Pakistan and the issues and challenges that Pakistan confronted during the initial stage of Pakistan's creation. Now we have the second resource person whose theme is the first 30 years, 50 years, for 50 years. Very crucial time indeed. And the resource person is Professor Dr. Shaheen Akhtar. She is requested to enlighten us on this theme.
I'm greatly honored and pleased to be here. This is an institute where I started my career. And it's always reminds me my beginning as a researcher. And now I'm more into teaching, but I continue with the research. General Dr. Raza Muhammad, in fact, very eloquently highlighted the pangs of the birth of Pakistan, which my family is also part of. From Gurdaspur to Kashmir, we suffered and continue to really suffer. So we still have the people who had the parents, the families, and the next generation that has actually borne the suffering and the consequences of creation of Pakistan. And we really value the people who sacrifice for the creation of Pakistan, really value the place, the identity that we got and we live in, and we pray that it continues to flourish. The first 50 years of us, should I move this? Which direction should, is it working, or should I can someone help me? This one. When I was assigned this topic, I was just wondering 50 years, what I'm going to do with the 50 years. There's so much to really talk about, how I should consolidate my thoughts. So and then I tried to really look at what are the major issue areas that have been very important in the kind of academic analysis that I am trying to indulge in. Somehow I'm unable to move. Can someone really follow? Okay. So what I realized was that 50 years were marked by pressures emerging from historical legacy that were pointed out by the earlier speaker, geopolitical constraints, and the challenges of nation building. We tend to forget we were actually a nation state in making, with all the challenges of a developing country, which inherited a lot of disparities, asymmetries, and say the region that we had actually was not really developing human resource as well. So how it evolves, and even the question of identity, which has been a part of the conversation thereon, how it has evolved. And it's a academic analysis giving both the say challenges and the achievement that we have actually had in this period. The first which one we come across is the dominance of geopolitics and security dilemma that we inherited, and throughout which continued and is still we live with it despite the latest national security policy, where we are trying to move away from the security-centric to people-centric state of Pakistan. So those dilemmas, but the challenges continue. The second is like constitutional development hiccups that we experience. Partly they have been pointed out by the earlier speaker as well. But it is like we had a lot of difficulties in basically dealing with the constitution making process of Pakistan. It's going. Should I move it? No. Can you move it backward because yeah. So the third important area is the challenges of democracy, political instability paradox that I talk about. How Pakistan has evolved as a democratic state and what have been the pangs of democratization processes in our country. The last one is, then I move on to the challenges of socio-economic development in the country. The social sector, say, suffered because of the security dilemma that Pakistan faced. And we see that the indicators have not really been very impressive. The last one is the issue of governance and societal and national cohesion. In fact, that we are actually, say, facing till today, but that has actually been a part of the nation building process here and elsewhere in any, say, developing countries as well. To start with is the dominance of geopolitics and security dilemma. I will say that the defense of the territorial integrity of Pakistan was at the heart of like the national security of Pakistan, as we started with. And that was reflected in Pakistan's attempt to forge, say, alliances with the West, especially America. We entered into like CETO and CENTO to ward off a threat from the East. So threat from the East has been a part of our concern throughout, which is reflected in the two wars that we have with India in 48, 65, then the East Pakistan crisis and the, say, Indo-Pak war. And then the several war-like crises like Brastex in 86, 87, the 1990 Kashmir crisis. And I'm just limiting it to the 50 years, but thereon till Pulwama, we have been, say, having such crises and dealing with it. Then over the water issues, we starting with April, say, 48, when India cut off water supply to Pakistan, we had like, this was like, while there was a conflict, there was also a positive development that we had Indus Water Treaty with this, say, mediation of World Bank. So there was a conflict, but there was like also, say, positive, say, aspect that we had this treaty, which is again coming under a lot of pressure because of new factors, new elements like of climate change, environmental degradation, and growing industrial and domestic uses. All those are actually putting a lot of pressure, and the hydropower development by India on the western rivers that were allocated to Pakistan are actually now in under pressure, and India is trying to maximize its right on those rivers which were allocated to Pakistan. We had to say, say agreement like Tashkent agreement and Simla agreement, but where the Kashmir issue was seen that it's going to be settled through dialogue, and India did recognize that's an outstanding dispute between the two countries. But they were product of war as well. So keep that in mind that war and all the peace effort went hand in hand, which continued. And we have the, say, later as well, we see that composite dialogue, and now we are stuck with the stalemate and as which because of the say Hindu nationalist government in power in India. With Afghanistan, we didn't have ideal relation either. We have had not a very, say, positive start. They laid irredentist claims. They didn't recognize the Durand line. And then there was a Pashtunistan issue. So in 60s and 70s, we were actually dealing with that distress and tension. Then there was a Soviet invasion and Afghan jihad. So in both, our external security and internal security was actually compromised. So that's why I feel like dominance of geopolitics have been like the security dilemma that Pakistan faced is very much say shape Pakistan's destiny. It's not the security domain, it is other domain, socio-economic, political domain. Muslim world as highlighted by Mushahid Hussain Saab as well. We had a very good start, like the pan-Islamism he talked about. Pakistan have been supporting the right of self-determination of all these countries which were engaged in the national liberation wars, Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, Eritrea, and all that. So that actually formed the basis of the good bilateral relation. Then we had OIC Summit in 74, which was also seen that Pakistan is the leader of the Muslim world and all that. China and was developing relation with China was a very positive development. That was also linked with our security dilemma as well. We started diplomatic ties with the communist China when it was nowhere. Then say building of the KKH was a landmark which connected Pakistan with China and provided link to China to get to Arabian Sea. So the CPEC that you see today actually is very much embedded in that. So over the years, Pakistan heavily relied for its defense and military needs on China. Then you can see that reflected in the JF Thunder, say that we have from that and joint production of that. That was part of mitigating your security dilemma as well. So that on the constitutional development, we didn't have a very good start, starting with 35 Act. And then when we started our own constitutional, say, making process, we had this objective resolution as the basis of that. And then we stuck into developing consensus on the basic issue, what should be the nature of the government, nature of the state. And in 56, 62, and 73, finally 73 settled those issues. So it took us 9 years in the beginning. India had constitution 1950, we had 1956, which we could not really take off. So the language and all other issues that I flagged, the power sharing between the provinces and say the federal, say, were like the issues. Then at several times, constitutions were abrogated. They were suspended later on, which produced instability. Without getting to details, it's being flagged a bit. And then we had, in fact, those episodes in the 60s and 70s. Challenges of democracy, which was linked with that. And I've phrased it like political stability, instability paradox. So when you have democracy, you feel like there's a stability. But when it is disrupted, there are various factors that are really producing, say, instability. So the colonial legacy in conjunction with the feudal and tribal power structure that we inherited, which continue to really we are struggling with, weak political institutions, recurrent leadership crises have resulted in political instability. It has also expanded space for military interventions. So there's a combination of factors which is basically responsible for that. Within the less than 25 years, we lost East Pakistan, which was like a consequence of geopolitical and structural fault lines beside vested political interests. Just flagging the major factors. Further, the values of democracy such as equality, justice, and tolerance remain under stress. So you have the still like that struggle continuing till today. On the positive side, what you see is Pakistan is a hard country. Okay. we see the struggle for the restoration of democracy several times, where the political parties as well as civil society playing a very active role. So this is something we cherish. Then the challenges of socio-economic development, again, with the very limited resources that we inherited, weak industrial base and rising population, Pakistan faces the challenges of socio-economic development. Pakistan began with only 34 industrial units, okay, out of the 921 that were, present at that time. And those were very small industries like cotton, textile, sugar, cotton ginning, and rice husking, which contributed to 7% of the GDP and employed, say, like 26,000 employees. So what you see is a regional disparity, asymmetries that you started with. But in the 60s, what you experience is the Green Revolution. So that was remarkable. Pakistan had like a lot of foods insecurity issues, PL 480 and all that. You remember that when we were Pakistan with the like 34 crore per population, we were dependent. Then we became food self-sufficient. And the industrial development, though it was not really remarkable, there was not much of a heavy industry. We have one steel mill, which still not really very impressive in its in terms of its production, but still we had actually the SMEs, small medium enterprises, have grown over the period. So the manufacturing sector has started slowly contributing to the GDP. Is still not really very remarkable, but it is an agriculture sector dominates, but it has now more of a problem. Engages 45% of the labor force of Pakistan today. Then Pakistan established a very vibrant banking system, which is like recognized world over. On the social development side, the lack of, government priority because of the defense needs as well, and also the, resulting in the low budgetary allocations, and also institutional development has contributed to low human development indicator. So you'll see that. And within that, you have regional disparity, like the province of Balochistan, and the female literacy is very, very low. So in the health sector, education sector, and growing income inequality, and that has been there. And the poverty. Even when there were some, achievements were made, if you compare these stats, but still I would say it is not something that is one can take pride in, but need to really work a lot on that. The last, challenge that I feel is the issue of governance, which are increasingly becoming important, and the societal and national cohesion, which has been flagged by the national security policy as well, but that has been actually a challenge with us throughout. The country has remained engaged in struggle to define a national identity and evolve political system needed for its ethnically and linguistically diverse population. That was something we were unable to really bring in to strengthen our identity, with the result that that led to the alienation amongst the population from the areas, starting with the East Pakistan, where you see the language movement became a very, very politically explosive. And then you see the Sindhi, Balochi, and Pakhtun sub-nationalism, which is like, Pakistan is a very unique and very rich country in terms of its culture and heritage, which we should actually be proud of. Then the link with that is like a rise of extremism and culture of intolerance in the wake of Afghan Jihad, which has further ruptured Pakistan's society, and we are still paying the cost, and we are trying to recover from that. But that has been actually in the 70s and especially the 80s, where we have this problem, rising. Good governance is very important, that ensures your social justice, economic development, and peace. Unfortunately, Pakistan lacks in good governance, which is caused by weak institution, political instability, rampant corruption, nepotism, favoritism, lack of accountability, transparency, poor law and order situation. So what you see is, if you look at the international report of Transparency International and all that, you will find that every time our ranking is quite low. So with the result, it has undermined the social justice, economic development, and societal peace in our country. So that is an area which is increasingly really affecting Pakistan. To conclude, I would say that the report card for the first 50 years of Pakistan is a mixed picture. Pakistan's security dilemma dominated its resources allocation, geopolitical alliances, and its internal security, as well as socio-economic development. The country was able to overcome its constitution-making hiccups, but challenges to democracy and socio-economic development have continued. National cohesion has remained a challenge, while good governance remains a dream. So I end here. It is just an attempt to really consolidate the challenges and the achievement that we have had in the first 50 years, and they reflect on there's a continuity of those factors, say in the next 25 years, even to when we are at 75. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Shaheen Akhtar. Dr. Shaheen Akhtar Sahaba enlightened us on the first 50 years of Pakistan. Now we have the last resource person, Dr. Yaqub Khan Bangar, who will be educating us on the next 25 years. He is online, so I request Dr. Yaqub Khan Bangar for his talk.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum ji. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to this panel, and it's lovely to join you here, even though it's like 2:30 in the morning here in Boston. But I'm very happy to be part of this panel, and especially with luminaries like Dr. Qibla Ayaz, who, of course, as you all know, was very recently honored with a civilian award. So congratulations, sir, for a very well-deserved honor. My topic today is about the sort of the 51st to the 75th year, and which of course is, still quite a lot of years to talk about. So what I will do is I will pick a few topics and then talk about them, and then kind of make some theoretical interventions about them. I should preface this by saying that there are lots of other topics that I have not picked, because in 15 minutes you can only talk about certain topics. You can't really talk about all of them. And what I will also try to do is be a bit provocative, so that by the end of it, I say some things that make us kind of think and wonder about quite literally the next years from 75 to 100, because these are the issues that I think have lingered on in Pakistan, and we really need to kind of think about them in a very deep and a concerned manner if you want to develop Pakistan further. So let me begin a little before sort of the 50th anniversary. I know it's 1997, and Dr. Saiba has very well actually covered it in her thematic bits. But let me just begin a bit earlier, from perhaps 1988, and take that decade of democracy, so to speak, that Pakistan had from 1988 to 1999, and treat that period as a glass half full. I know a lot of people think of that period, that democratic period, where it was a seesaw match between Benazir Bhutto and Nawaz Sharif in power, not as a very successful period. But let's really look at the fact that maybe it was something positive also came out of it. And I would posit that one of the very important things is the fact that actually elections took place, the fact that actually prime ministers were elected to a certain extent, and with at least limited rigging, if nothing more. And the fact that it continued for 10 years showed that Pakistan was inching towards some form of democratic understanding. And this, I think, I would argue, was very critical, because that period showed us the problems, but that period also showed us how things can actually go forward in Pakistan. So that period, of course, had lots of corruption, had lots of questions of development, lots of issues of misgovernance in a number of ways, but it had its dramatic positives too. We had the first woman prime minister in a Muslim country, and that was a big deal, because no other Muslim country had that before that. She was one of the few women prime ministers in the world, regardless of a Muslim country also. So that was a great benefit. We actually made some strides, and we kind of forget about this now, since we're so used to the Lahore-Islamabad motorway, that it was the first motorway in South Asia. We also forget that during that time, there were developments made in terms of literacy, in terms of at least a bit of liberalization, economic liberalization in Pakistan. So it wasn't a complete kind of a failure kind of a period as we look back upon it. But what it did show, it showed a couple of things which I think are very critical and important. First, it showed that for democracy to succeed in Pakistan, you cannot have multiple centers of power. Why did that 88 to 99 period to a large extent fail? Because there were multiple centers of power. First, it was the presidency. Then with the presidency, it was the army chief. And then afterwards, it remained, sort of that tussle between the prime minister and the army chief. And these are very important things, which mean that if you, in fact, to quote, to sort of use a term, if you rig the system even before the politicians are a part of it, you can't blame the politicians for its failure. And since I work on the first decade of Pakistan at the moment, I think that period between 88 to 99 really takes us back to the first decade of Pakistan, because that was the same thing. Why did seemingly, quote unquote, democracy fail in the first decade? Not because the politicians were terrible at their job. In fact, they were not actually that bad, but mainly because the system was rigged against them from the beginning. You look at one simple fact, we forget, yes, there were 8 prime ministers in the first 10 years, but we forget that for the first 3 years, we had one prime minister, Liaquat Ali Khan. He was assassinated. Then afterwards, we had Khwaja Nazmuddin. And he was removed by an unelected and appointed civil servant, Governor General Ghulam Muhammad. He was not removed because he had lost his majority in parliament. He was not removed because it was maladministration or anything of that sort. The Governor General wanted him removed. And that's where democracy began to get derailed, when power shifted from a prime minister to other offices. So it was the same thing in the 88 to 99 period also. If the power is not with the democratically elected, however democratically elected leaders, it will fail. So you rig the system even before the politicians become a part of it. And I think that's a very, very important thing to remember. That's exactly what happened, and it keeps happening. Very recently, we also see some examples of it, but although in a limited manner. The other thing, which I think is very positive, though, is that Pakistan cannot survive without democracy. And I think that's a very important thing that the 88 to 99 period showed, that you have to work through the system. Time and again, even if we have had dictatorships, Ayub Khan's dictatorship, for some people, it was great. For West Pakistan, it was a great time. But even then, people were unhappy with it. So this innate sense of democracy, this innate sense of being masters of their own destiny of Pakistanis is, I think, remarkable. And I think that period, and even now, of course, we see that happening. And I think that was a very, very important thing. The third thing about the period, which I really want to talk about, is the fact that there was resistance to all the changes that General Zia-ul-Haq brought in Pakistan during his decade of rule. There was resistance from Benazir Bhutto, but there was also, to an extent, resistance from Nawaz Sharif's rule. And that again showed that even though Zia-ul-Haq's dictatorial regime changed Pakistan to a large extent, and we're still suffering from it, there was a pushback. Some people tried to change things. Some people tried to show that Pakistan is not what Zia wanted it to be, it to look at, and there was a pushback. Things were changed, and I think that's a very important thing that we must remember. So the 88 to 99 period, I think, yes, of course, had lots of problems, but it also had some very bright spots that we must remember. Now, the next period, the so-called Musharraf era, of course, it was a dictatorship and to an extent controlled democracy afterwards. And it's again very interesting that the Musharraf idea of controlled democracy to an extent takes us back to Sikandar Mirza, who also wanted controlled democracy. So in some ways, Pakistan is is on this pendulum where things happen back and forth quite a bit. But the Musharraf era in itself also, the way it ended, I think showed very important elements in Pakistan. And even during it, it was, I think, very interesting. The first thing which was very interesting, and I think one must kind of learn from it, is that Pakistan can learn from its mistakes and change course. In the 1990s, Pakistan was supporting the Taliban, had a huge hand in their creation and coming into power in Afghanistan. But in the war on terror, Pakistan could see that was not a very good pro-Pakistan policy, and things changed and Pakistan helped the war on terror. Of course, a lot of people were against it, but I think once terrorism began to happen in Pakistan, it was not a foreign war, it was a Pakistan war because they were attacking Pakistanis and killing our citizens. So Pakistan can learn from its mistakes and change. And I think that's a very good sign of a mature or a maturing, at least, country where you can actually learn from the mistakes you have made and correct the path. And I think that was a very, in some ways, a remarkable way in which we kind of did that, and a remarkable way in which we dealt with the emerging terrorist thing. One of the very fascinating things, and a lot of people have kind of compared this, that if the rise of extremism had kind of taken place under Zia's time, maybe it would have taken over Pakistan. The fact that we are still here, the fact that, no form of the Taliban has taken over Pakistan is a great success for Pakistan, which means that Pakistanis will not succumb to this kind of an exclusionary ideology, no matter how much they want to use Islam for their benefit. Pakistan is confident enough to have its own understanding of Islam, where these exclusionary things do not work. And I think that's a very important lesson during the Musharraf era that we take. The second thing, which is, I think, very important to understand also, is during that time, we came very, very close to, in fact, I think the closest ever to the solution of the Kashmir dispute with India. From, of course, its abortive beginning after Kargil, again, Musharraf led Kargil, but Musharraf also went to Agra. Musharraf also nearly solved the Kashmir problem. So again, learning from mistakes is essential. But we saw during that time is that Pakistan will prosper only when it has peace with all its neighbors, Afghanistan and India included. And the closest we came to that was that 5-point formula that was agreed between Dr. Manmohan Singh and Musharraf. And it's a shame that by the end of it, it didn't get signed. But that again gives us a blueprint to solve this problem. Of course, now things are much harder because India has, annexed Kashmir, and things are much, much worse there than they were under Manmohan Singh. But even now, I think our aim should be to resolve it and to go back to that formula, which, both sides had nearly agreed upon. And I think that was a great success of the time. And we must remember that, there was so much people-to-people contact, there was so much trade, and if you were from Lahore, as I am, a whole trade border was opened because there was so much trade between India and Pakistan. And I still remember, going on the road to Vaga and seeing, tons of hundreds of Pakistani trucks selling cement in India and making a lot of money actually. And I think that's a very, very important thing that we nearly achieved. And, a success. By the end of it, of course, it couldn't be signed, but this is something that we can really go back to, because the Kashmir solution is important, not just for the Kashmiris, but also for Pakistan also. The third thing, which of course happened during the Musharraf era, which is worth interrogating further, is the lawyers' movement. That was the first time in literally since the beginning of Pakistan that the judiciary actually stood up to wrong things being happened. The fact that, the doctrine of necessity, which was penned by, our second Chief Justice, Justice Munir, was finally laid to rest during this time. The fact that constitutionally, the Supreme Court asserted itself, the lawyers asserted the idea of the rule of law, the supremacy of the Constitution, that was very, very significant. And that has changed, as we all know, the nature of how the judiciary deals with politics, how the judiciary looks at Pakistan and deals with the issues presented to it. Of course, it has its problems too, but the fact that for the first time, the judiciary came out of the shackles of being controlled by other forces, to a certain extent at least, was a significant feature, and led to the final ouster of Musharraf, and led to several very important and critical changes in the judiciary that created the confidence of the people towards it. And I think that was a very important lesson to remember. Now, coming towards the decade after Musharraf, now the two elections, well, the three elections by now that we have had, and I think that's again a very good sign. This is the longest, of course, Pakistan has ever been democratic. So just in that, I think, is a great success. We haven't had an actual military takeover, and I hope that that never happens. Of course, it has its issues, and I'll come to it in a minute. But one of the most remarkable things during this happened, what happened during this time, is the 18th Amendment. And that is really, really important, because if something like the 18th Amendment had happened earlier, Pakistan would not have had lots of problems. Again, as actually Senator Mushaid was also saying, we do learn, and we have learned, and we have realized that it's the diversity of Pakistan that actually is its strength, rather than one monochrome understanding of its identity or its culture. It's all the different parts, all the different provinces, the different cultures, languages, people of Pakistan that make the country. And I think the 18th Amendment really, by decentralizing Pakistan, has gone back to what the 1940 Lahore resolution said and what the original ideal of making Pakistan was. And that has been a very critical marker in ensuring that all units of Pakistan feel that they're equal part of it. And that I think is a very remarkable thing. Then the mere fact that after 5 years we have had elections, that is very important. A long time ago, someone asked the first Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, how was democracy successful in India? And one of the things, he mentioned many things, but one of the things that he said is that after every 5 years, we have had an election. And just the fact that after every 5 years, there will be an election and an uninterrupted, democratic reference to the people gives the people confidence that the system will work, that things will develop, and that things can change. And I think just that fact that we have now achieved a couple of times is something really good. And just that fact will actually strengthen the institution of democracy in the country. And I think that's a very kind of an important thing. And I think that kind of continues up till now. Now I will just sort of talk about a couple of themes, which I think some of them I have mentioned, but a couple that I want to just add in a couple of minutes that I have, which are very, very, very important, and I want to highlight in some ways, controversially also. But I think it's very important to emphasize that. The first thing is the question of identity. Now, of course, all the speakers spoke about Pakistan's identity, spoke about Pakistan's past, and questions of its inception and its thought before that. But what I want to posit is that one of the very important things that we must do is we must create Pakistan's identity looking forward rather than looking backwards. And I know as a historian, that's a very odd thing to say, but I think that's very, very important. A lot of people in the past too, and even now with the 75th anniversary, asked me a number of times saying, oh, what do you think, Pakistan's creation was good or bad? And I said, Pakistan has been created. Pakistan isn't going anywhere. So it's a futile question to say, should Pakistan have been created or not? Let's say no. So will Pakistan disappear? Shall we all leave Pakistan? Shall we collapse Pakistan? Of course not. So it's kind of a very counterfactual and I think a useless argument that a lot of people have. Pakistan is there, has been created. It's been 75 years. It's not going to go anywhere. Even though it's split into two, it still survived. That's enough of a credibility of a country's existence we have. And I think one needs to look forward rather than looking backwards for its reasons. And with that, I would also posit that one must, and it's very important, look at, rather than looking at the two-nation theory, look at the one-nation theory. And that's a very important thing. Actually, one of our most underrated prime ministers, Hussain Shahid Sohrawardi, said that in 1957 when he was the prime minister of Pakistan, that Pakistan is a one-nation country because all citizens of Pakistan are one. That is exactly what Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah also said on his August 11th speech. And that is what Pakistan was based on. Once India and Pakistan, once Bharat and Pakistan was separated and created separate countries, the rationale of the two nation theory ended because that was it. After that, Pakistan is one nation and India is one nation, and everyone who lives in Pakistan is equal, no matter if they are Muslim, Hindu, Christian, Parsis, Ahmadis, whoever they are. They are all one nation. And I think that's a very important concept that the founder of the country actually gave us, that citizenship, equal citizenship of Pakistan should be a really important thing. And I think that is something to look forward to and ensure, because unless that is ensured, Pakistan will never move forward. So I think this confusion that at times looking back creates, again, I would re-emphasize, one needs to look forward as the one nation of Pakistan rather than looking backwards, because once Pakistan is created, the rationale is done. It's done, it's achieved. What is it looking forward? It is one nation of all its citizens, and they're all equal. That is what the founder of the country said, and very intelligently said. A lot of people disliked what he was saying, but he was making a lot of sense, because you can't create a new country and then say people aren't equal, because then that is something that they were scared of in India. So if they created a new country and not created equality, that doesn't make sense. Second thing, which is very important, which I will highlight, which again is for the future also, is self-confidence in Pakistan. One of the real problems Pakistan has had since its inception is this sense of being unsure about itself. कि पता नहीं हम कौन हैं, क्या हो जाएगा. So oftentimes we look towards Arabs. Sometimes we look towards the Turks, actually. Then the US, the UK, recently China. We look towards Saudi Arabia a number of times. But we are actually very important country in ourselves. So what I would posit is that we need to look inwards. We need to look towards the people of Pakistan for our inspiration, not outwards, not towards any other country to say that we are Muslim or to say that we can develop. We are pretty good ourselves. So trying to look at other countries is, I think, a very bizarre kind of a way of creating a nationality or creating an identity. And I'll give you one very interesting example which fascinated me when I looked at it. Some of you might know, but a lot might not know, that when Malaysia's constitution was being written, they actually asked Pakistan's help, because Pakistan at that time, as we remember, was the largest Muslim country in the world and the first Muslim majority country in the world that meshed ideas of Islam and modern democracy. So Malaysia wanted to really learn from Pakistan. Similarly, when Nigeria got independent, they wanted to learn from Pakistan. So rather than getting from others and influenced by others, and as some friends of mine say, becoming al-Pakistan, it is very important for us to be self-confident and say that in fact we can teach the world. We have actually done lots of exemplary and important things where we can be very self-confident about it, and I think that's a very important thing. The third thing that I really want to talk about here is that which I've mentioned a bit earlier also, is the essentiality of democracy. Pakistan was created with a democratic mandate. The Muslim League won the 1946 election, and only then Pakistan was created. If it had lost the election, Pakistan would not have been created. So that's a very clear thing. And therefore, it is essential that democracy survives in Pakistan, but not in any hybrid fashion, not in a fashion where it is compromised, not in a fashion where the system itself is rigged against the politicians. From day one, we have had this great doubt of politicians. We never really trust the politicians. We actually say that there's something bad and something's wrong with them, and we can't really trust them, and all of that. We need to get over that and actually let them run the system. Look at the parliamentary democracies in the world where the politicians have the final say. It will take us time. It is not something that will be done with 1 election, 2 elections, or 3 elections. It took Britain hundreds of years to get to where it is. So it doesn't really matter, but we need to go through the process rather than skip the process. We need to give democracy a chance, but real democracy a chance, rather than rigging the system initially against them. The fourth quick thing, and I just have 2 more points, so I'll just conclude, is, and this I really want to say a bit controversially, is that corruption is not the problem, really. Britain was very corrupt when it was developing. America still is very corrupt. I see corruption here all the time. Mughal India, when it was actually a world power, was extremely corrupt. Extremely corrupt. You couldn't get anywhere without giving a huge bribe. Corruption is really not the thing. It's a scapegoat. Of course, it should be lessened, and it should not be that much. But that is not the thing. That is usually used in Pakistan as a scapegoat. We have a question about functionality. We have a question about institutions. As Asamoglu and Robinson have shown, it's a question about institutions. Once you have rule of law, once you have confidence in institutions, then things can work. And then actually corruption will come down. And that's a very important thing that we must really look at. The last thing that I really want to mention is we have a population now that is over 2/3 composed of people under the age of 40. This is a great chance that we have to either make or break Pakistan. And if I can just end looking at the really from 75 to 100 time period, all I want to say is that we need to really focus on how to develop these people as good citizens, as good Pakistanis first. Again, to quote Sikandar Mirza, one must be Pakistani first before anything else. And creating good citizenship, knowing how the rule of law, constitutionalism, the democratic process works, all of this is very, very critical. So unless we focus on our youth and actually develop them, Pakistan will not really develop for the next 25 years that we're looking at. So the bottom line is that I think there's a lot of glass full in the last 25 years of Pakistan. And I think if we work on this, we can by the year 100, when the Institute will, I hope, invite us again to talk about this, we will have actually learned from our mistakes and achieved much greater heights than we have. So thank you so much for listening.
We have three very scholarly resource persons who gave very informative talks on diverse themes related to Pakistan. Due to paucity of time, we are skipping the question answer session because scholars for the next session have already arrived. But on the tea break, I hope that our young delegates will definitely come up with questions, with seeking more information from the resource person, and that tea break will make this event more productive and result-oriented. For me, it was a great honor. I learned a lot. It was a remembrance of the history of Pakistan, right from the creation to this day. The challenges and the opportunities were mentioned in a very clear and candid manner. Pakistan is the newest entity on the world map. 75 years, the Diamond Jubilee that we are celebrating, is not a very long time in the history of a nation. But I think Pakistan has made a history. We have challenges, there is no doubt. But the way Pakistan has come out of the challenges is remarkable. Probably, and I think that surely within the Muslim world, Pakistan is the only free and democratic country. You can have public gatherings, you have a very vibrant, independent social media, you have a free press, you have TV channels. If you compare Pakistan with the rest of the Muslim and many other countries, I think those people are not enjoying these democratic rights that Pakistan is enjoying. And then the very positive aspects that, like, for example, we have the first Muslim country that we have a woman prime minister. And we hope that in the coming years, the women empowerment will increase and they will be more visible in the political, educational, social, and other arenas. Mushahid Hussain Sahab told us about another aspect. People whose forefathers were not in the favor of Pakistan, but when Pakistan came into being, they announced that now Pakistan is like a mosque. Before the construction, before the creation of the mosque, we may have a difference of opinion. But when the mosque has been built, now it is our responsibility to make it vibrant, to make it populated, to make it well attended. And Pakistan is as dear to us as our own homeland. And we saw that family of Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan and family of Abdul Samad Khan Achakzai, they became chief ministers, they became governors of the provinces, very vibrant in the Pakistani politics and very pro-democracy and pro-Pakistan. So these are the strengths of Pakistan, which our generation is trying to bequeath to our coming generation, the generation representatives of which are sitting in front of us. Pakistan is probably the only Muslim country, and in comparison to other countries as well, which has a very vibrant young population of youth. If our generation gave them a better education, equipped them with skills, because though they are so creative that the young generation that I have seen in many other countries, Pakistani generation, Pakistani youth is more creative than others. So if they have an education based on skill, based on creativity, we hope that we are heading to a brighter Pakistan and safer Pakistan. With these words, I conclude the session. Thank you very much indeed. And I am very grateful to the management of the Institute of Regional Studies for giving me this honor to be the guest of honor in this session. I thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kiblayaz, and all the esteemed panelists for, we had a very interesting and very informative session. I would just like to inform the panelists that there are souvenirs next to your chairs, which is a token of our thanks. So we will be handing those over to you. And now we'll move over for tea outside. We're going to take a short break for 15 minutes. It's a 15-minute break. You are welcome to ask your questions from the panelists during the break, and then we will reconvene here at 12:15 for our next session. Thank you so much. We'll be starting in another 2 minutes. We're just waiting for all the audience and the panelists to move back to the hall. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to session 2 of our seminar today, which is non-traditional challenges to national security. For this panel, our session chair is Ms. Aisha Khan, who is the Executive Director of Civil Society Coalition for Climate Change. Our speakers are Dr. Ghulam Rasool, who is the head of the Climate Change Program, International Union for Conservation of Nature, Senator retired Ms. Sitara Ayaz, who is the President, International Parliamentarians Congress, and then we will have Ambassador Nadeem Riaz, who will be joining us. I would request Ms. Aisha Khan to take the stage, and the rest of the panelists to please take your seats. And Ms. Aisha Khan, if you could give your opening remarks as the session chair.
Assalamu alaikum and very good afternoon to everyone. It's always a great pleasure for me to come and speak from this very prestigious platform. And I'm always grateful to IRS and Ambassador Nadeem Riaz for giving climate conversations space in all the events that he organizes at this place. So today we're going to talk about 75 years journey of Pakistan. And I want to go back to the independence when we came into being as a nation, and then how much have we moved forward, what we have gained, what we have lost, and what we have learned in lessons. So when we started out originally as a state, we really didn't have much going for us. We were very small, we didn't have institutions, we had to build from scratch. But I think with few lows and many highs, we did fairly well over these years. We have demonstrated that we are a resilient nation. And I say that because when we look back at fragilities, disasters, calamities that we have faced, the 2005 earthquake is a question in point, the 2010 super floods, even the COVID pandemic, we have come out of it, less damaged than we should have as a nation with the kind of resources that we have. But in one thing we have not done well, and that is managing our environment. From day one, we have not been very conscious about the need for conservation of the environment, because perhaps we thought that these resources are infinite and we will have them forever. But now there's a new player in the game, and that is called climate change or global warming, and that is creating new challenges for us. So we have to look back and say, okay, we managed all other kinds of crises. But climate change is a kind of crisis that is not entirely in our own hands. It's happening at a global level. We are actually suffering the impacts more. So what is it that we can do? Because we are a signatory of the Paris Agreement. That means that we have committed to reduce emissions. We have presented a nationally determined contribution, which means Pakistan says we will engage in both mitigation and adaptation, but these are largely conditional. We are also asking for a lot of money. So we are reliant heavily on external finance to say for the mitigation, transition to renewable, and for adaptation, we need this money. But if we don't get this money, what are the challenges that we will face, and what is the plan B that we have in hand to cope with these problems? So for these very important questions, we have to have a discussion today, and we have a group of very esteemed panelists with us today. And before I introduce them, I just, as part of the background, also want to share a little data with you about Pakistan. That, when we started out, since this is a journey of 75 years, our GDP was 3.8 billion. Today, it is 300 billion. Our per capita income was $85. Today, it's $1,798. We produced about 3.3 million tons of wheat, and that has increased 8 times. Our rice production was 0.7 million tons. It is 13 times more today. We had cotton of 1.1 billion bales. Today we produce 8 times more. Our literacy rate was only 11%, and we've taken it up to 58, anything between 58 to 62%. So these are major quantum gains that we have made. But despite all of that, today we find that Pakistan had to go back to the IMF 22 times. That means that economically we are fragile. And that is a point that I'm raising because our NDC is also conditional. We rely on external finance, and internally within the country also the biggest challenge that we are facing really is an economic challenge. So in this context, I'm going to now introduce our speakers, and we will discuss the different issues that we have and get expert opinion from them. Dr. Ghulam Rasool, welcome and thank you for coming. Dr. Ghulam Rasool is a former Director General of the Pakistan Meteorological Department. He has worked as Regional Program Manager of the Mountain Environment Regional Information System at the Information Center for Integrated Mountain Development, EC Mode, and he's currently working as Head of Climate Change in Pakistan. Dr. Ghulam Rasool, my question to you, and I'm sure the audience is very interested in knowing, what has gone awry with our weather patterns? We've all lived and experienced it, some differences in how weather patterns change, but this year it has been drastic for us and at the global level. Can you share, what is exactly happening in the global planetary regime that is making the weather patterns so erratic?
a great challenge for countries like Pakistan. Global warming is affecting the general circulation of atmosphere, and that is impacting the changes in climatic patterns in different parts of the world. Pakistan, especially located in heat surplus zone already, and this is suffering from the north moving systems, weather systems, and also those which are generated in tropics. In Pakistan, if just we look at the last 2 decades, lot of changes have occurred. And the temperatures have broken the records of meteorological history in different parts of Pakistan, especially the central and southern parts. Heat waves have been so intense that we never imagined. Drought and flood co-occurrence and recurrence, that has been now very common. If we look at just Balochistan had been suffering from severe drought over the last decade. Up to 2019, there was all the planning process was focused on the water scarcity in Balochistan.
Asked this question, that doesn't the Met Department give time advisories on what the forecast is to get the time for preparing?
Let me just give you the example of drought and then flood. If we look at the general circulation pattern, westerly waves and easterly monsoon system, that is producing rainfall in Pakistan, and those rains used to not reach in Balochistan or the northern parts of the country. But due to the changes in climate, the pattern has changed, and this year the monsoon focused on the southern half of the country and gave a lot of rain, 500 times more rain in July in Balochistan than the average. If we look at the capacity of Pakistan Meteorological Department, they are issuing 1 month outlook. That outlook is reliable for planning purpose. And if you look at their forecast in June, which was announced over the media, social media also, they warned that this monsoon will be stronger and this will be producing floods in different parts of the country. You cannot localize flood 1 month ago, that which part will receive flooding and which part will be dry. But general pattern was very clear, which was mentioned. Unfortunately, we are lacking in resources. We have, especially provinces like Balochistan, is a big province and it is calamity hit already. Drought was prevailing. There was perception of people that these people are giving predictions that there will be flood in Balochistan. In Balochistan, seldom rain. So there is no chances of flood. This perception sometimes force them or give them incentive to settle in the waterways, and they don't care about these predictions. Institutions are not approaching those people to convey the gravity of situation. So those people, therefore, they suffer from these sheer weather systems.
One last question, Dr. Ghulam Rasool. You said that, the floods that happened in Balochistan were unexpected. And this is largely due to gap in financial resource. So is it only finances or is it poor planning and is it lack of capacity as well? Because if they had a 1 month lead time, at least the government institutions responsible should have alerted, reacted, evacuated, given advisories to people.
You were not able to manage it. It would have happened under all the scenarios. But the most important thing was the lives of people that could have been saved if there was better planning. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, that capacity of PDMA in Balochistan, that is not good enough. We have to enhance the capacity of people, and we have to, one more thing. We are always thinking about the recent happening. We are focusing on that aspect. But now we should understand the scenario of Balochistan, that Balochistan is drought hit and flood hit area. So there should be some integrated water resource management approach, which will have some social dynamics, which will have some physical dynamics included. So that should not be focusing on one aspect. There should be a collective integrated thinking to resolve the problems of Balochistan.
Yeah, that paints a very scary scenario, Dr. Ghulam Rasool, because what you're saying is essentially that Pakistan has to be prepared for floods, for droughts, and for hotspots. So we have to look at all three scenarios simultaneously without knowing which one will hit us when. So it's going to be a period of great uncertainty. So that I'll come back. I'll come back to you on the hydrological changes. But now I'll move on to Senator Sitara Ayaz. Sitara Ayaz has wide experience of work in a variety of fields like climate change, environmental issues, and human rights. She's currently serving as the Secretary General of the International Parliamentarian Congress. So, Senator Sitara, all the issues that Dr. Ghulam Rasool talked about, you were in the parliament. So parliament actually represents the people. It is the forum where discussions take place that talk about the social and economic well-being of the people, and they also talk about preservation and safeguarding the ecological and environmental assets of the country. Do you think that the parliament is playing the role that it should in raising the level of advocacy to tell people what are the threats and risks that Pakistan faces? Or do you think it needs to do more?
Is it okay now? Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. And thank you very much for inviting me here for this very, very important issue, which is climate change. Before I start, I just want to say a few words. Maybe it's not related to climate, but it's as we are celebrating 75th anniversary of Pakistan. So I would like to say a few words, and that is that today over here, we are all here for celebrating 75th anniversary. But it is so unfortunate that we are taking all our programs or whatever we are doing, it is all in English. I simply don't understand that being a Pakistani and when we are celebrating our anniversary, why English? It is me also, because all my points and everything here is in English. And if I switch to Urdu even, most of my maybe sentences and words will be in English. That we should come out of this thing and we should promote our language. We should promote, if we are the one actually who are sitting in the parliaments, who are here, you all, we all actually, we have to promote our language, because I believe that whatever you want to say from your heart, it should be in your language, and in your own language, you can speak out your heart instead of in another language. So that is my suggestion, maybe, because there is no one, any foreigner here. I think we all are.
We do have one foreign guest here from the French Embassy.
Okay, sorry. Sorry, but still, I feel that we should adopt our, it's a national language, and we should, whatever our programs are, it should be in Urdu. It's not your fault, it's our fault also, because as I said that I'm also going to talk in English, because most of the sentences, but then when I want to say something from my heart, not the written thing, that maybe then I will switch to Urdu, maybe, or maybe to Pashto, but not Pashto, because many of them over here, they don't understand Pashto. So thank you again, Aisha. As you said that climate change, it is a very important issue, but it is so unfortunate that I remember before 2015, that in the parliament, especially in the provincial government, we had environment committees, but they were not very active. Over here in the Senate and in the National Assembly, we had climate change committees, and that was so unfortunate that it was not a priority of any parliamentarian to be a member of that committee or to be to heading that committee. So just to oblige someone, they used to give that committee to anyone over there. So no one was taking it seriously. As you mentioned, that we thought that we have all the resources and everything, so it was not an important subject. But now with the near past, if we look into that, and especially from 2010, if we all remember that floods, and I was in KP, I was a minister, and at that time, I remember that how difficult for us to take care of people over there and the damages which happened. But then after that, we all knew this, that we are at we are the 10th, I think, one in the countries ranking first. We were ranking 5th in the, according to a global climate risk index by German watch. Pakistan, then Pakistan dropped to from 5th to now 8th position. Now we are in it. So after that, then we started, the government started, the parliamentarians started taking action also, and started making some policies also, and especially my brother, when he's quite experienced and worked in these sectors, and I know Aisha also, she's working and very dedicated to her job. Then there are a few things which the government did, and the past government, you all know that tsunami tree project they started, though I was in opposition and I was not a part of the government, but I appreciate that at least something they started, that we need more greenery on our side, which in our childhood we saw all these things, but with the passage of time, cutting of trees and all these, and then the population is a very, very big problem. We are expanding, and the people are moving to from rural to urban, and even in the rural areas also. So these are the things where when I came to Senate, that was my priority, to be a member of Climate Change Committee. So throughout the 6 years, I was in a climate change committee as a member, and later on I was chairing that committee also. So we tried to work with the international community also. After 18th Amendment, we face a problem in many sectors, and environment is one of them. I just want to give you an example that with the committee, we went to Karachi. And though as a senator, we had only our jurisdiction, I must say, that we were only supposed to work in Islamabad. But I took my committee to Karachi because for there were so many problems after the rain. Still we have a problem that, and our sea, and then marine. I think you people also work very closely on mangroves. The cutting of mangroves and all this. So we went there. And believe me, when I went to a Navy headquarters, not headquarters, I don't remember, but some Navy office near the sea, there was smell where I couldn't breathe. Such a bad smell. And I asked that what the smell is. And they said that let's go. And we went to that seaside, and it was like full of, it was everywhere. There were like nobody was there to clean that area. And then one of our member, he took the water from there and sent it to the lab. And what we got the lab, they said it is more than I don't exactly remember, but it's like the gutter water is better than this water. And it is not good for a human even to go inside this water. And we send that to Sindh government. So they said they have their own problems, financial problems, administrative problems, so other problems. So after 18th Amendment, the provinces are facing, and they have their separate laws for them. Federal has their own. So the coordination, lack of coordination between the provinces, between the parliamentarians here and the provinces, that is also one of the biggest issue which we are facing. But I remember that some of the parliamentarians, they are very serious, and they are working on the policies. They are working on implementation of the policies. We have glaciers which are melting. We need more reservoirs, which we talk in the parliament regarding that. The small reservoirs we need. We need the continuation of billion tree tsunami. That we need. And we need a consistency in our policies, which is lacking, which we want, and we are working for this. Met Office, I just want to you asked the question about, I want to answer because that was for him, but because we work with the Met Office, and again, Met Department is not fully equipped. Even here in Islamabad, it is not fully equipped. We are facing the problem of smog, which is our bordering neighboring country. It is from them, but we are not able till the date to sit with them. The parliament to parliament, we need to sit, because the parliamentarians are the policy makers. We need to discuss this with our neighboring countries. It is unfortunate because there are some political issues. Because of that, we cannot sit. And I'm sure that it's a problem of all of us. It is a regional problem. So they have to sit on one table and discuss this thing.
Thank you, Senator Sitara. I'll come back to you with the next question, because we have to talk about, regional climate cooperation, and we'll discuss that in my next round of questions. We unfortunately don't have Dr. Arif Wahid with us, but Ambassador Nadeem Riaz, who's equally qualified, is going to talk about the food security aspect of climate change and how Pakistan is going to get impacted. So, Ambassador Riaz, I mean, we know that from the surface water, nearly 90% goes in irrigation. From the groundwater, nearly 60% goes towards irrigation. We also know that there's going to be scarcity of water. Pakistan's already a water scarce country. So how is this decrease in water going to affect our agriculture, and how will climate change exacerbate this?
Thank you, Aisha. I think, it's very important that first of all, we must see that whether Pakistan is a food secure country or not. At this point of time, according to the various reports which are available, we have about 63% of food security. About 36% of our general population is not food secure. Now, there are a number of reasons for that. Some are due to the various cropping patterns which we have, due to various things in agriculture, and I can go over that. But first, to answer your question, obviously, we are a country which is fast becoming water scarce. And we are becoming water scarce, and this will affect productivity around Pakistan. Now you have to realize that in Pakistan, all the provinces don't have equal share of water. So there are places where there is drought, and there are places where there is flooding. Now, whether there is drought or whether there is flooding, both of them contribute equally to low yield per acre. It contributes to poor cropping patterns. It actually contributes to the number of people who are actually living off the land. Now, if you look at the economy of Pakistan, I think agriculture provides about 19% of the GDP, but it employs about 43% of the people. So now with climate change, if the food is not going to be produced, like if you have a low yield per acre, you will fast become a country which is going to be which is going to be food scarce. You will have population which works in the fields. They will have to move to the cities. Already now you have cities which are mega cities like Karachi, and even Lahore has a lot of population. So unless and until we really tackle the problem of providing food security, we are heading towards difficult times, because once the people start moving, when they move, they also take with them some problems, and they also create some problems in the larger cities, because and then again, when people don't have food, or there is less of food, there will be anger. So you're looking towards rise of extremism. So I really think that we need to focus on policies, because there is a lack of coordinated policies, not only between the center and the provinces, but there is a variance of policies between the provinces. So I think if there is a major challenge which the country faces, it is climate change and water, because water is fast becoming scarce. So with scarcity of water, and there are many reasons for that, and I mean, in the Q&A I can answer that.
Okay, so one other thing that I want to ask you, because you talked about poor cropping patterns. We have not done an agroecological survey after the 80s, and the climatic conditions have changed. So you think we need to kind of go and do that to see what kind of crop should be planted where, and what do you have to say about the cropping patterns? Are we growing water intensive crops in a region where we are short of water? Should there be a policy, legislation, any regulation to decide who or what region can grow what, so it's more compatible?
Well, start off with the first thing, because in Pakistan, we say that we've improved a lot on the feudal system, but honestly we haven't. Your land holdings are either too large or they are too small, and you have not been able to amalgamate, despite various policies which have come out in the past, the land holdings. In addition to that, we are not using the proper seeds. The quality of seeds is very poor. Then once your crop gets produced, you are not using the right fertilizers. You are using a lot of chemicals. Then, unfortunately, due to poverty or number of other reasons, or due to lack of coordination, there is no mechanized farming which is done. Like, I mean, we are still farming like, we were farming about 50, 60 years ago. So obviously that affects the yield. The small land holdings make things very difficult. Then there is this unrealistic load shedding. There is this shortage of water. The water, like, when it comes in the rivers, we've not made those small storage dams. So like, the water just either fertilizes the land too much, like, it brings in a lot of silt, or like, what happens is that the water carries away a lot of good soil. So like, and obviously, like, all this can be taken care of, but it requires an intensive capital. But when you don't have the intensive capital, or you don't have the schemes for it, then it becomes a problem. Obviously, there is, like I said previously, there's a lack of coordination in the policies. Farmers decide what they want to do. There is no overarching structure. I humbly beg to disagree with some of my earlier speakers in the last session that the 18th Amendment was the best thing. I really don't think so it was the best thing. Because like, fine, it may have given the provinces a lot of ability to do what they want to do, but there has to be a coordination. Now, minus the coordination, things become very difficult. So like, we still are using the crops which are water intensive. Obviously, like, I think this luxury, and please Aisha correct me, I think this luxury will virtually end after 2024, because, we would be losing about 40% plus of our water resources. So unless and until, like, we are able to tackle all these things, I think Pakistan, from a country which was food secure and food surplus, we are gradually going to, like, go over the edge where food security will become a major challenge.
Thank you, Ambassador Nadeem. Although I wonder how much that has to do with the unsustainable growth in our population, because we have increased crop yield, in the last 75 years, but the population growth rate has been much more than that. So we've not been able to cope, along with some other challenges that we are facing. But Ambassador Nadeem was talking about water, and that brings me back to you, Dr. Ghulam Rasool, hydrology. Because, we are a part of South Asia. We are part of the Himalaya, Karakoram, Hindu Kush mountain ranges. These are the ranges that provide us with water. And we hear a lot of time people talking about, what's happening in the cryosphere, what is happening, how is the permafrost behaving, what is the mass balance of the glaciers. I don't think the layperson, the ordinary person, understands these terms. So what are these terms? What do they signify? And why are these mountain resources of fresh water so important for us? And how will the changes happening there affect us, our food security, our energy security, and water for other needs, our groundwater reservoirs as well?
On the cryosphere, upper Indus Basin, which is composed of 10 subbasins, those are glaciated. Snow and ice is there in the form of glaciers, more than 7,000 glaciers in political jurisdiction of Pakistan. And they are melting at different rates. Himalayan glaciers are melting at the fastest rate, especially Western Himalayan glaciers. And Karakoram glaciers are somewhat stable, are gaining mass, which is known as Karakoram anomaly also. But there are few glaciers which are showing surging behavior, gaining mass, because they are at the high elevation. Then Hindu Kush glaciers, water resources of Hindu Kush glaciers, we are sharing with India also, with Afghanistan. And those are melting also at faster rate. And that rate is increasing every time. If you look at the temperature warming pattern of Pakistan, I will downscale it. Over the elevations, increase in temperature is around 1 degree, 0.75 degrees Celsius. But over upper Indus Basin cryosphere, temperature increase is already 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is the target of this end of the century in Paris Agreement. So the temperature increase is getting higher and higher. Therefore, melting is faster. Permafrost is melting. That permafrost melting is creating problems of our infrastructure damages, because infrastructure is already built over there, and they didn't know that ice is underneath. That ice is now melting, and therefore Gyari-like incident that was of large scale, but small scale landslips and sinking of surfaces that is happening in different parts of GB.
So, Ghulam Rasool, I mean, do you mean to say that now, with accelerated melting, the glacial lakes that we have also, and we've categorized 33 as high risk, they are also at a higher risk of melting, and we're going to see more Shishper-like events happening in the next 5 years?
Forming and disappearing. That is not a permanent feature. Sometimes glacial lakes, they drain their water from one place to another, and they disappear. But glacial lake formation is on rise. And those glacial lakes are also receiving additional water due to incursion of monsoon. Because monsoonal water is around 15 degrees Celsius, and glacier ice is -4, -5 degrees Celsius. This 20-degree difference in temperature that accelerates the melting process when it is impacting on the glaciers. I had some slides I wanted to show you, but anyway, now monsoon is getting stronger. Strength of monsoon is increasing because of the difference in temperature of land and the ocean. Ocean is relatively colder and land is getting hotter. Due to that difference of temperature, that is driving force of monsoon. And monsoon is taken to the higher heights than the normal. Chitral was not receiving monsoon. Now, Chitral every year is receiving heavy monsoon. Likewise, in the foothills of Himalayas, those glaciated parts, there are flash flooding. Malakand division, that is the worst hit of flash floods, and the glaciers over the north of Malakand division, those are melting at a much faster rate compared to the past.
Reservoir capacity from now compared to that time. First, we have
Asha projected future of glaciers in HKH region. That is horrible. If global temperature increases to 1.5 degrees Celsius, 1/3 of HKH glaciers will disappear. And if business as usual scenario prevails, I mean, current emissions continues, then the decline of glacier mass balance will be 2/3. But fortunately, Pakistan has taken very good step of reforestation. This is a welcome step, and this is the golden aspect of long-term strategy of Pakistan. I have studied the temperatures of KP over the last 7 years. There is a declining trend. And in KP, the rainfall pattern is not that vigorous. It is getting stable. So this is a positive sign of reforestation. And I think this is the remedy which we can follow, we can adopt for the glaciated zones. In GB, plantation is not that much taken serious, but there should be. In GB, those plants which are pine in nature, they take 100 years, 70 years, 80 years to get some maturity. But although some of the generations will suffer from what we have done already, but I think future generations will be on the safer side.
Okay, so that brings me to you, Senator Sitara Ayaz, because you touched upon the subject of regional cooperation. And, Dr. Ghulam Rasool has also talked about the HKH, and, it's a regional mountain system that provides us with our water resources. So how do you think we can overcome the barriers for cooperation and decouple some of the issues which have held us back from engaging more in areas where it would be good for the environment, good for the ecology, and good for the communities that live in that area. Also, I want to ask you, since you talked about, coordination and the 18th Amendment, that yes, that is an issue, and, the devolution has its plus points and it also has a few challenges. But what is preventing Islamabad from passing groundwater regulatory regime, or what is preventing Islamabad from increasing water tariff to at least save the water that Islamabad has and use it more?
Aisha, this was my question also from the ministry when I was in the Senate, and we tried to work on it, and there were few technical people also who were hired by the government to work on Islamabad issue, and I hope it is in a process and they're working on it. So that was from the parliament, and then the government, it was sent to the government. The regional, as you all said over here, that water scarcity is a very big problem in the region. But the water which we are receiving is coming from the Tibet, if I'm not wrong. The Tibetan rivers are coming, and then to other countries also, but here also. Yes, from there. And we all are using it in many countries. But when it comes to Pakistan, then if we look into that, the 2 dams already China is building on their side on that river. Then when it comes down to India, then India is also using that water. And then at the end to Pakistan. So Pakistan will be facing a severe shortage of water, and Balochistan is already facing this thing. Already scarcity of water is there. This is, in fact, this is going to be a security threat in the coming future. And we need to work on this thing. We need to have a good policies for it. Again, I'll stress and mention that with the neighboring countries, we have to work on this issue. This is not only our issue, it's a regional issue. Almost 1/5 of the world population, they are living in South Asia. And a majority of us will be facing. And as I said, it will be a security threat, economic threat, food security, and then it comes to security threat, naturally. So I want to mention, right now I'm working as a Secretary General for International Parliamentarian Congress, where we are working with the parliamentarian globally on issues, and climate change is one in our thematic area. Climate change is one of our top priority, and we are now going to have a conference on water scarcity here in this region, especially our South Asian countries, which we will be taking all these points. And I mentioned before that there are many countries who are not sitting on one table for so many reasons. But for this, on this platform, we would like to gather these parliamentarians, and we would like to discuss this very important issue of water. The Pakistani government, I just want to a few words on this also. I was working as a commissary to Chief Minister Balochistan on climate change for a year. Last year, I was working with them. And you will not believe that in our childhood, when we visited Quetta, the water level was, I mean, fine. But now the water level, even in Quetta, it is like, I exactly don't remember, maybe you know that the level of water, it's, yes, 1,000, and it's going down. And we need, and if you go to Quetta, Balochistan, you will not find any tree over there. It is even they are not getting last year there was no snow in Quetta and in surroundings. So this is only one example of Balochistan. It's going to be happen, God forbid, in KP. KP has some other problems because of climate change, but water scarcity is a big problem, and the policies maker in the parliament, in National Assembly, and in Senate, we did work on it. Now it is going on, but the big problem here which we are facing is political stability, which as you know that there were many good steps taken in 2013 at that time government for environment. Then it stopped. Then there is another, which I mentioned, that tsunami tree, which is a very good. And I hope that the policy, there will be consistency in the policy, at least in climate, which again, everybody knows. And we need to sensitize our parliamentarians at the provincial level also. Again, after 18th Amendment, coordination is a big problem. And especially in this area, our parliamentarians at the provincial level, many of them, they know, and many are working on it. But we need more, we need to work more with them on this issue.
Just one last question on this aspect from you. That in 2017, the Climate Act was passed, and establishing the Climate Authority was part of it. That would have been the perfect platform for this coordination.
Yeah.
The last government was there for 4.5 years. It did not operationalize. This government is fairly new, so we can't hold them responsible. So why are we not operationalizing a platform that will give you the forum for coordination?
I was coming to this, it's a good question. I was coming to this Climate Change Authority. In papers, I was also a member as a chairperson of Climate Change Committee, and it was under a Prime Minister. It was a very good initiative, but still it is pending. We all are waiting. We did pursue that. I believe Sherry Rahman, who is the Minister of Climate Change, and let me tell you one thing, she's not here, but she, by her own choice, she selected this ministry because she wants to work on these issues, especially on this Climate Change Authority. This authority is the main, I must say that from a federal government where maybe there will be some coordination between the provinces are one of our project, GLOF project for KP and other, but it was not still, I think it is pending. They did some of the work they done, but it is again pending because of lack of coordination between the federal and the provinces, which is a very good project for glaciers, the melting of glaciers. And they are working in Gilgit-Baltistan right now, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, they are working on that. But again, yes, we need this. We need this climate change authority. And I hope that this government, last government was there. This is all, I think, the political stability. Because when there is stability, things are there. Good policies are there. Everything, but we need to implement now. Implementation is a very, very challenge, I think, for all of us. Implementation of these laws which we have. So I'm always very positive about things, and I hope that we will achieve what we have legally, what we have right now. We will, and the consistency in our policies. We will carry all the good policies of the old government which they have and not stop them.
So thank you so much for that, Sitara Ayaz. It's good to hear positive note and hope that we have opportunity for improving. Ambassador Nadeem Raz, back to agriculture and its connection with water. We've heard from Dr. Ghulam Rasool that we're going to have scarcity of water. So we'll have floods that will also not be good for agriculture, then we'll have scarcity. So the other option we have is increasing our groundwater storage capacity. And so far we are showing little to demonstrate that we are harvesting rainwater. So how important do you think that will be to secure our food security? And what steps have we taken, if any, to have a food bank as a reservoir?
Well, the basic thing is that obviously due to climate change, either you have too much of water or you don't have any water. Like, if you look at Pakistan, we've had in the recent past lots of rain when there is post-harvest. So that actually destroys a lot of the food items which are practically ripe for the market. From your last question, I actually didn't touch upon the population aspect, but obviously if each year you have more hungry mouths to feed, you can be producing the same amount of food, and yet again, it will not be enough to actually cover the entire population. So we do have rapid population growth. We have urbanization. Unfortunately, there is this low purchasing power. You have problems with the you have problems with the roads from the villages to the markets. You unfortunately have erratic food production, and we do have an inefficient food distribution system. Saying all that, like, and yes, we either we have land which is waterlogged or land which is water scarce. You spoke about the small dams, like, well, now they are initiatives. Like, I know it from a very personal point of view, because one of my close cousins, he's a civil engineer, and he's being tasked to build these small water storage dams in various parts of Pakistan. But again, over there, you find that there is always this, the best word would be a sort of a disagreement between the locals and the governments, because, like, the locals would probably want a dam at a particular place, the government wants to have it in another place. So, like, again, back to the same thing, lack of coordination, back to the same thing, lack of implementation. So I think that's a major
But would
issue.
you say that, lack of research is also one of the problems? Because what we need is, heat resistant and low water using crops. And we have not done anything in that direction. In fact, if you look at the crops of Pakistan, it is the highest value of water in every crop, which is low in cash value. So how do we reconcile that? Why have we not taken that route to invest in research, which will be the future cropping pattern?
I think there are many reasons. You have the problem of poverty. You have the problem of having low financial resources to the small holding farmers. As far as the large holding farmers are concerned, they can invest, they can have mechanization, they can have these modern seeds. You unfortunately don't have schemes where you can actually give out to the poor people very good quality seed. And like, today is the era of genetic modernization of what you are producing. Unfortunately, we don't have that. Or if it is available, it is at a fairly high cost. I mean, if you look at the price of fertilizer, it has increased, I think, about 7 to 10 times in the last 5 years. So like, for people with a low income level, it becomes a bit difficult to invest in that kind of seeds and those kinds of fertilizers, which will lead to a higher yield per acre. Like, I mean, if you look at the potato crop, it's probably one of the, I mean, I can use the word sturdy because, whatever you do, the potato grows. But unfortunately, Pakistan has the lowest potato yield per acre as compared to other countries in the world. So, I mean, if you can't increase your productivity, which is the yield per acre, obviously you will continue to have problems. And then I think you need to have policies, because the people who actually produce, they get the least amount of profits from what they produce. It's really the middleman which makes all the profit. So by the time, like, something leaves the actual place where it grows until the time it hits the stands, I think our farmers are the one which make the least amount of money. It's basically the middleman which actually takes all the profits.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. I think that, in this discussion, we've highlighted the challenges of water, we've challenged the challenges of food security, and the important role that parliamentarians actually have to play to come out with the right legislation. Because, we're looking at 75 years of Pakistan, and that is what I said right in the beginning, what have we gained, what have we lost, and what lessons have we learned from this journey. So we have to look in the future, and the next 25 years before Pakistan celebrates its 100th birthday are going to be living in a very different time under very different circumstances. So it will not be the business as usual scenario that you can keep developing at the pace and you can keep overcoming the challenges as they come. Some challenges may become unsurmountable. So I think in that, the phrase that is often used, working with the whole of society, working with the whole of government approach, in this case, being a part of South Asia, working with the regional approach, are all extremely important. So I thank all the participants, and I think I will open the floor for question and answer. We have enough time to take the questions from the floor and have an interactive session. Please. And before I open the floor, let me just request that say your name and if you belong to an organization, and if you have a speaker in mind, ask them directly, and make it a brief question so that you can get a targeted, focused response. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. It's Gulasha Bharti. I'm a PhD scholar. Okay.
We can't hear you.
I'm from Minhaj University, Lahore.
No, I think you have to open your mic.
Am I audible now? It's Gulasha Bharti, and it was really informative to join this session, and I am actually enlightened. There are few things I want to add, that that I believe that the things we have to change on society level. I mean, there are a lot of things that without any expensive, investments, we can change that. For example, we can, educate the local, the agriculture, the farmers and the students, and, the community work is important, I believe, because there is a very important thing I have seen, that is water harvesting is a process. I believe that, that water harvesting is once a society is being built, then the builders, they construct the house in a way that there is a separate tank of to store that rainwater in that, and then utilize after that for various purposes, the gardening and all that. So water harvesting is it's a small process, and you have to educate it. Then there are a lot of things of that your new methods of agriculture, for example, the sprinkle method and the dripping methods. मेरा ख्याल है कि these are less expensive things, and we have to educate. And our nation, we are that much resilient that we are always ready to acquire something new. That I know that there was a time when 2 years back we started that 1,000 tsunami trees, and I have seen that in a small village in the Punjab, the students over there in the schools, they were that much enthusiastic that they were because that the government was encouraging them, so they were planting the trees and they were doing it very well. So I believe that societal level improvement is important, individual level. Okay, just forget about for some time being for the policies, because they have bigger plans for it, and I believe and I pray that they are successful in that. But still, individual level, societal level changes are important. They are less expensive, but they are, they can bring drastic, the bigger changes in that. I believe in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions?
I'm Mariam Sajad, and I'm intern in IRS. I have a question from Ma'am Sitara. Ma'am, you have mentioned that this issue is something that is going to pose a serious challenge, and it must be securitized. And we see that we have taking measures. We have started taking measures, and in these measures, we are making ambitious goals like cutting down the carbon emission till 2030 to 50%. But if we notice that our agriculture production produces 90% of the carbon, and our energy sources, that is on coal, and how can we make such ambitious goals? And this issue is directly impacting our economy. And the next challenge we are going to face is our population, our youth, and that is going to cause a serious youth unemployment. It is going to increase the unemployment rate. And do you think that Pakistan should abandon these rhetorics and to be a part of these ambitious goals at global level, and it should stop acting naive and work firmly and in taking measures and take technical persons on board to develop such kind of policies? If we talk about solar panels, solar panel has a maximum threshold of 36 Celsius, and we face harsher temperatures than this. And it is not going to be protective in case of Pakistan. And we are now going to move towards solar panels, and we don't take these effects into consideration, and we make our policies without taking these measures, these effects. Do you think we should stop acting naive in making such policies?
Yes, you're very much right that what we are right now, again, at the provincial level also and the federal level too, what steps we are taking, it is in the future, it will get back on us. Like what you mentioned is that coal, electricity from coal and the solar systems and all, we should be a part of a clean energy, a global clean energy system, which in Europe they started that, and they are, in fact, they are importing and exporting this clean energy from I don't remember exactly the word of that in a desert they are having, and we are also having that windmills and all. So they are, and we should be a part of that globally. And as I mentioned that we need more work we need to do more work with our parliamentarians. We need more to, because they are the policy makers, and for the future also they will be making these policies. So of course we need to work with them, and we need more environment friendly policies. It is in the long run harm Pakistan overall. So yes, I agree with you. We need more environment friendly policies.
Ambassador Riaz, do you want to add something to that?
Yes, I would like to add. Apologies. When you are talking about climate change, like, Pakistan, I mean, in a globalized world, you are part of a system. So obviously you have to make certain pledges. And those pledges are actually based on a reality which you have. So obviously you need to have some figures, and I couldn't agree with you more that we need to invest more into cleaner sources of energy. I somehow disagree with you when you say that the solar panels can only take 36 degrees Celsius. No, they can go up to about 50 degrees, 50 degrees plus. And now in Pakistan, you are producing, especially a lot of domestic producers are producing a lot of electricity from solar panels, and they are working pretty effectively. What Senator Satara referred to was the aeolian energy. And yes, we have a lot of wind corridors, especially in Balochistan and in parts of Sindh, which can actually produce energy. And whether you like it or not, we have to move towards cleaner energy. And on the 14th of August, Pakistan launched its first electric vehicle, though it will be available for people in 2024, but that is the path for the future. So maybe like in 10 years time, you will suddenly find that all these diesel vehicles and these petrol gas guzzlers will simply disappear. So I think we are taking steps in the right direction. And yes, I guess we need to do more. That is most important. And I think we need a regional approach also.
My name is Jamal. I would like to know from you as to what pledges we made in Glasgow, how far we have traveled now, and do you think the targets we promised are achievable, and areas where we are lacking behind? Thank you.
Is that question for me? Okay. Yes, what we have done in Glasgow is we have updated the NDC, which is also part of the Paris Agreement. We started out with the INDC, which was the intended nationally determined contributions. Then next year we made it the NDC, which then gets formally accepted. And then every year now we have to update, every 5 years actually, but now because of the IPCC reports that have come out that are saying that we must bring temperatures or keep temperatures down to 1.5 degrees Celsius, every country has to now renew its commitment. So Pakistan has updated it and made some, there are no new pledges. It's the same old pledges of mitigation, adaptation. It has just said that it's going to now ask 30% external finance and 15% it will contribute from its own resources in mitigation. But like many other developing countries, Pakistan's NDC is conditional. It is highly reliant on external finance. The new pledge that it made at Glasgow was the methane pledge, which personally, if you ask me, it was not necessary for Pakistan to make that pledge right now. We have enough on our plate to meet the commitments that we have made in Paris to mitigate and to adapt. And the Sharm el-Sheikh COP that is coming up is largely going to be about climate finance, because the 2020 climate finance agreement terms and conditions have come to an end. So new pledges by the developed world will have to be made to say how much of that is going to be available. And Pakistan has a major constraint in developing bankable proposals. It doesn't have the capacity to develop proposals and get them. When you look at, the share of the Green Climate Fund and you see how many countries are accessing that finance, you see that India claims a much higher percentage of that share because they submit more proposals and they are eligible to get those. We outsource proposals. The only 2 times we have got for the GLOF projects from the Green Climate Fund, $4 million and then $38 million, we had to engage UNDP. So I think we need to improve our capacity. And like, we got a comment from the floor that Pakistan in its delegation needs to include more technical people to attend the sessions over there and lobby with the region collectively to ask for climate justice, because the basic fight in this upcoming COP, like in the others, will be loss and damage. We are saying compensation for loss and damage and more funds towards adaptation. And that is not happening. And that's becoming the fault line between the global north and the global south. So that is where it will be this year as well.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Aisha Arshid from NDU. My question is a kind of suggestion. I can be wrong. We are talking about the non-traditional challenges to our national security, and the one major problem that we all have noticed and you guys have mentioned is the implementation of the policy. So is it possible that we introduce a charter of democracy under which the policies related to these challenges are made by the research centers with equipped researchers, and these policies should be like rigid? No government and no change of government should implement the status of those policies. Rather than that, जो भी government आए वो उनकी implementation के लिए जो भी process है उसके अंदर काम करे, rather than changing the policies, because we are seeing a total instability in the political process of Pakistan, and that is obviously halting our economic stability. So for our economic stability, or to cater all these challenges, shouldn't we introduce a rigid system of policies just related to these traditional issues? Because in sabke solutions are more or less same, but the implementation and the way each government is tackling with these problems is actually holding a major process in the implementation of all the suggestions you guys are giving.
Senator, would you like to answer that question? Was it addressed to Senator Sitara? Okay, I will just say something, and since it's a policy issue, we will pass it on if Senator Sitara wants to add on to it. I think, when policies are made, the next government doesn't really change it. Remember that the climate change policy of Pakistan was made in 2012. After that, so many governments came, nobody touched that policy. The framework came into being in 2013. Nobody has changed that. All the government did now recently, at the insistence of civil society, was to update that policy, because after the Paris Agreement, we felt that we need to now factor the instruments of that policy into our implementation regime. And we also wanted the Gender Action Plan to be part of it. So to update it, it's a living document. It has to be updated every 5 years. But I don't think any government comes and changes a policy. Lack of implementation is a problem, and that is a problem that we have with every government. They make very good policies, but they're very poor on implementation. And that is where I think the role of the parliament comes in, because there has to be an accountability for those policies, that if you made them, what were the short-term goals, medium-term goals, long-term goals, and have they been achieved? And if they have not been achieved, what are the reasons for that? So we make committees upon committees, and we make policies after policies, and they're all very good. But at the end result is that there's lack of accountability in our systemic functions. And that is where we need the correction. And then everything else will also fall in place. Senator Sitara, if you want to add on.
You're very much right that the policies are there, And yes, with the passage of time, slightly changes because of with the time, things change. But what I said before also, that it's implementation. Implementation is a problem here in Pakistan, not only in climate, it's in other areas also. So of course, it is our duty, it's the parliamentarians, and to some extent in the climate, which is a very serious issue, and the parliaments are also taking it very seriously. So they are now implementing few things which we can see also, and in future also, I think that the other government, this government also, the previous also, and I hope the coming government, all of them, they are taking it seriously, as it is not the climate only. It is food security, it is security, otherwise security, economic issues, all is with this climate change.
Ambassador Riaz, would you like to add on? I think he wants to add on to that, and then we'll.
Policies are always made in the national interest, so it's really immaterial which government is there. It's the thing which is which you are referring to is the focus. Like, you know, a particular government can focus more on clean energy. A particular government may want to focus more on governance issues. So that's one thing, and that's the prerogative of the parliament, because the parliament is supreme when it comes to making policies. I think the other thing which we, if we do an analysis of our last 75 years, it's not the making of the policy, it's the implementation. And why is it the implementation which is an issue? It's an issue because there is a lack of qualified people. It's like square pegs and round holes. That's the biggest problem. So, like, you know, if you can have the best possible policy, if you have a capacity issue in the provinces, and there is a major capacity issue, and I speak from experience, because, like, you know, when we were negotiating GSP Plus, the ability of the provinces to implement the policies, I mean, there was a great disparity. So, like, you know, it is that particular thing which becomes an issue. It's not the policies. In fact, like, let me tell you, a number of people say that Pakistan makes the best possible policies. The problem comes in when you want to implement them on ground, and on ground you can't implement them because there are capacity issues. So unless and until you address those capacity issues, you will always end up with a problem.
एक छोटा सा शेर याद आ रहा है
इरशाद फरमाइए
कि वो ये खाकी अपनी फितरत में न नूरी है न नारी। इसका पहला मिसरा क्या है एनीवन? अमल से जिंदगी बनती है, जन्नत भी जहन्नम भी। तो with all due respect to my dear senator who is here, policy implementation, the young lady very brilliantly was trying to show us कि जहां अपनी जरूरत हो तो फिर डेमोक्रेसी के लिए, हर चीज के लिए ऐसी इम्प्लीमेंटेशन होती है कि ना स्क्वायर पेग और ना राउंड पेग की जरूरत पड़ती है. They would pursue it mercilessly for their own political agenda. And you don't need to cancel a policy. You just need to disown it. आप भूल जाए पॉलिसी को, 50,000 पॉलिसियां पड़ी हुई है, ये भी एक सही. So this is a case of moral failure on behalf of the parliamentarians, on the behalf of the dirty old bureaucrats. I'm not including you, sir. And ये अखलाकियात की मार है. और अब ये जरूर बहुत बड़ा सवाल पैदा होता है कि how do we reform more morally? Some people are very loud and vociferous these days कि moral reformation is society की होनी चाहिए, होगी वगैरह वगैरह. I wish them the very best of luck. So these were my little initial response.
And I congratulate the young lady in the back, NDU में.
I just want to add, आपके उसमें आप before us there was another panel. Qibla Ayaz Saab bhi was in that, and I don't remember other names जो भी उन्होंने बात की regarding Islamic सारा जो और पाकिस्तान और ये सारी चीजें. तो मेरे ख्याल से जो आज हम बैठे हुए हैं तो हमें जरूरत ही ना पड़ती इधर बैठने की और ये इतने सवाल करने की. आई एग्री विद यू कि अगर हम सबसे पहले जो हमें इस्लाम ने सफाई निस्फ ईमान है उसको पूरा कर लेते तो ये जो कूड़ा कचरा और ये जो सारा एनवायरनमेंट को खराब करने वाली चीज थी यही ना आती. जिसको मैं regarding Karachi when I mentioned that when I went and there was so many ये सारी चीजें तो ये चीजें होती ना. लेकिन वही बात के मिनहसुल कौम हमें बहुत सारी चीजें हैं अगर हम वो अडॉप्ट कर लें तो शायद ये जो पॉलिसीज हैं ये खुद ब खुद इम्प्लीमेंट होनी शुरू हो जाए. तो बिल्कुल मैं एग्री करती हूँ आपसे कि पहले मैं एज ए पॉलिटिशियन पॉलिटिकल वर्कर एंड देन बाकियों पे फिर मैं उंगली उठाऊंगी कि हाँ मेरी गलती है और मैं खुद अपने आप को ठीक करूँ खुद. लेकिन हम मिनहसुल कौम सारे एक दूसरे पे उंगली उठाने से बेहतर है अपने आप को ठीक करें. आई एग्री. थैंक यू.
So I would like to add something. I've been a bureaucrat for 36 years. And very humbly, I would disagree with you. Please don't point to the politicians and the parliamentarians and the bureaucrats or the military for the failures of this country. We are all responsible. If we can't drive correctly in Islamabad, if out of a fancy 3 crore vehicle, we throw a McDonald's bag out onto the streets of Islamabad. So don't blame the politicians. Don't blame the bureaucrats. You have to reform the society. I will answer your question. Sir, I went to a missionary school. Ji, sir, let me. Sir, may I answer the question first? Sir, may I answer the question first?
Please go ahead and answer
Sir,
the question.
It starts from your home. आपके माँ बाप आपको सिखाते हैं, आपके उस्ताद आपको सिखाते हैं. कितनी इज्जत करते हैं आप उस्तादों की सोसाइटी में? You learn from home, and now you have the social media. This young generation should use the social media to first teach people how to behave. This is the way this country will make progress. We have to take ownership. It's our land. It's our country. There are no imported solutions. The solutions will come from us. It will come from this generation. You pointed it out. This young lady who's sitting over there, she hit the nail on the head. So we have to do it. That is the.
Do you have a question?
पिछले जवाब में. So no national security policy. No national security policy can be formed without defining national values and national interests. Have we done that, sir? क्या आप लिस्ट आउट कर सकते हैं कि पाकिस्तान के नेशनल इंटरेस्ट, वाइटल और मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट पैराफिल क्या हैं, या नेशनल वैल्यूज जो कायद ने दी थी यूनिटी फेथ डिसिप्लिन के अलावा भी कुछ हैं, या वही 3 हैं जो कि हमने इम्प्लीमेंट नहीं की? और दूसरी बात ये, जिस तरह आप फरमा रहे हैं कि आप ब्लेम नहीं कर सकते, तो सर फिर किसको करेंगे? ये सोसाइटी जो पिछले 40 साल में बर्बाद हुई है, तो जो लोग रिस्पॉन्सिबल थे, अगर उन्होंने उसको करेक्ट करने की कोशिश नहीं की, तो ये यंगर जनरेशन किसको ब्लेम करे? फिर ना आप पॉलिटिशियंस को कुछ कह सकते हैं, ना फौज को कुछ कह सकते हैं, ना ब्यूरोक्रेसी को कुछ कह सकते हैं, तो किसको कहें सर? फिर घर में ब्लेम आएगा, बिल्कुल आएगा. फैमिली ने हमें ग्रूम करना था, लेकिन उस फैमिली को किसने ग्रूम करना था? उस फैमिली को किसने गाइड करना था? तो सर मैं नहीं समझता कि हम स्ट्रेट अवे ये कह दें कि नहीं जी everybody is responsible. Everybody was not in power. People were not in power. अभी थोड़ा बहुत लोगों में अवेयरनेस आई है, सोशल मीडिया जैसे आपने जिक्र किया. मेरा ख्याल है ये कहना ज्यादती होगी कि एवरीबडी इज रिस्पॉन्सिबल. आज अगर लोग ड्राइविंग सही नहीं कर रहे हैं तो किसी ने इंप्लीमेंट नहीं किए है ना. कुछ अर्से पहले तक इस्लामाबाद में रेड लाइट नहीं तोड़ सकते थे, अब क्यों तोड़ रहे हैं? बिकॉज अब प्राडो वाला तोड़ के गुजर जाता है, तो फिर आल्टो वाला कहता है मैं भी चला जाता हूँ. तो सर इस तरह मेरा ख्याल उस बच्ची ने बड़ा सही सवाल किया, और सर ने जो बात की थी वो भी बड़ी वैलिड थी. तो सर ने शेर पढ़ा था, अगर इजाजत तो मैं भी पढ़ दूं कि ये झुकी झुकी निगाहें, इन्हें मैं सलाम कर लूं, कभी इनका मुंह मैं पीटूं, कभी अपना लाल कर लूं. क्योंकि इस तरह नहीं होता, इस तरह नहीं होता.
Related to the particular panel which we have over here. But let me take you a little bit to the global level. We are very critical, aren't we? We blame our politicians, we blame our bureaucrats, we blame our army. It's fine. You are welcome and you are entitled to your opinion. The country which is right next to you with the name of India, how many of their people go on the social media, go internationally and say that what is happening in India is incorrect? So when you become overcritical of your own self, you basically create a perception in the minds of others that you are a country which is always on the wrong side. I served Pakistan for 36 years. The biggest challenge I had was the issue of perception. It was never the issue of reality. That's the first thing. So you referred to the national interest. We do have a national interest. It's well defined. It's well documented. We do have a national security policy now. It's there for everybody to read. So you cannot make policies in isolation. You are a country which is in a particular region. You have neighbors. So obviously your policy in this neighborhood is overwhelmingly on security. If you were a country which was in some other region of the world, maybe you would be looking elsewhere.
I think, Ambassador, that we will conclude this discussion on the note that climate is a security challenge at the global level now. So, we have to look at it through that lens, that climate is a security challenge and the whole world, the global community has to work together to find solutions and, take the planet forward. Right now, we're talking about survival of the planet and the human race. But to take the conversation forward, we have a question from the Deputy Head of the French Mission.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for once again having such to lead this campaign about. And secondly, I was interested by the discussion about domain that my Ambassador Calais came on 26th of January, has met assets in the field of agriculture, especially the use of technologies and exactly in and we want to pursue that bit. Is a position now, but it's full of drama, full of tragedy. Had a revolution every 15 years. Stable. We had in the first part of the first part of the century, it was the World War, it was the colonial. Mentioning this the figure of Pakistan at the independence, and what are the figures now? It's the first time I came to Pakistan, it was 2013 for short mission. I was in Afghanistan at that time. And by the way, Afghanistan, this is my personal opinion, maybe, but it has not been very well managed, at least by us, by NATO, by the West, etc. Maybe the advice that we heard from Pakistan was were to be listened also. And everybody has this problem, and everybody. And when I came back for permanent post here in 2019, I had the impression that Pakistan has moved forward. First, arrival at the airport, it was not at all the same. The roads have changed. 2013, it was full of checkpoints everywhere. Even I remember an Afghan came back from an 13, there was a lot of I remember I was in a think tank in Kabul in the 13th, and they were saying that, look, the balance of force will change in the region because Pakistan, having this huge deficit of energy, which will increase, will completely depend on this regional project coming through Afghanistan, TAPI, Kazas, 1000, etc. But it didn't happen. Pakistan could solve the problem of the energy resources. Then people tend to see the bad thing, but see the big picture. For me, for what I see, from what I think, and I was reading by the way, there was two messages. The first two messages on Radio, who came to Radio Pakistan to congratulate. It was a China, not still the Popular Republic of China, but China, and let's say, if you see the big picture, for me, the work of this bureaucracy that you're mentioning, the success, like all these new capitals, Islamabad is considered the most successful.
Thank you so much. I think seen through the foreign lens and the French lens, Pakistan seems to be doing very well, and quite rightly so. You know, if you look back at Pakistan, where it was and how much progress it has made in the last 75 years, I think it's quite remarkable. The challenges that we have faced, the neighborhood that we live in, the calamities, the disasters, but we've always bounced back as a country. So one thing is for sure, that Pakistanis and Pakistan as a nation is a very resilient country. We're going through some temporary setbacks right now, but I think there is a lot of hope that things will settle down and we will move forward and manage our own affairs with due diligence. The only uncertain element in all of this, and that's not only for Pakistan, that is for the entire global community, is the global warming and the patterns of climate that are changing. And we are seeing, France yourself, you know, with fires and floods that you're facing in Europe, elsewhere, in North America, in Russia, you know, everywhere, every country is having to cope with challenges. And I think, you know, to assess 75 years from when we came into being and became independent, and the next 25 years. So we have to plan a trajectory, and we have to factor a lot of these uncertain things that will happen. And I think that remains our biggest challenge. How do we anticipate adaptation and we move towards it in a way that we minimize damages and we retain that ability to bounce back? So with that, I thank all my panelists for their time and the audience for this very interesting Q&A session, which is animated, which always makes one feel that, yes, the audience was listening, the audience is engaged, and we hope to have more such conversations. Ambassador Riaz, thank you so much once again for providing IRS as the platform. And like I always say, never leaving climate out of your conversation space here. Thank you so much for it.
Thank you so much to all our panelists and for such an interactive and interesting conversation. We will be taking a lunch break of 35 minutes, and then we will reconvene for our last session of the day. Thank you so much. We do have small tokens for our panelists as a thanks from Institute of Regional Studies. Thank you so much. See you after the lunch.